Story 1. The Loop on Interstate 80. Marcus Webb had been driving cross-country routes for 23 years, and in all that time, he'd never gotten lost. Not once. He prided himself on knowing America's highways like the back of his weathered hands, could navigate from Seattle to Miami without consulting a GPS. But on a frigid February night in 2019, somewhere in the desolate stretch of Interstate 80 cutting through Wyoming, Marcus discovered that experience meant nothing when the road itself stopped following the rules. He'd left Cheyenne at 11 p.m., hauling a load of farming equipment to Salt Lake City. The weather report promised clear skies, temperatures hovering around 15 degrees. Perfect winter driving conditions for a veteran like Marcus. His Peterbilt hummed smoothly as he merged onto I-80 West, the dashboard clock reading 11:47 p.m. He remembered that detail with crystalline clarity because of what came after. The highway stretched before him, empty and dark. Snow-covered plains extended endlessly on both sides, broken occasionally by fence lines and clusters of winter-bare trees. Marcus kept his speed steady at 65, watching his fuel gauge. He'd filled up in Cheyenne and calculated he had enough diesel to reach Rock Springs, about 180 miles west. Standard run, nothing unusual. At mile marker 235, he passed a distinctive billboard advertising a ranch supply store. The sign was weathered, featuring a cowboy on a bucking bronco, one corner peeling away. Marcus noted it absently, his mind on the podcast playing through his speakers. A true crime story about disappeared hikers in national parks. 20 minutes later, his CB radio crackled to life. "Westbound on 80? You got your ears on?" The voice was male, tinged with static. Marcus picked up the handset. "This is westbound Peterbilt. Go ahead. Just wondering if you're seeing what I'm seeing out here. This weather's getting weird." Marcus glanced at his surroundings. Still clear. Still cold. "Looks fine from where I'm sitting. Where are you at?" "Around mile marker 215, heading east. There's this, I don't know, like a fog bank, up ahead. Never seen anything like it." "I'm past 215, Marcus said. "Didn't see no fog." "Well, lucky you. Stay safe out there." The radio went silent. Marcus hung up the handset and checked his mirrors. Empty highway behind him. Empty highway ahead. The podcast continued its narrative about a family that vanished without a trace from a campsite. That's when he saw the billboard. The same billboard. The cowboy on the bucking bronco. Same peeling corner. Mile marker 235. Marcus's foot eased off the accelerator. That wasn't right. He'd passed that sign 20 minutes ago, which meant he should be near mile marker 255 by now. Not back at 235. He checked his odometer. It showed he'd traveled exactly 20 miles since leaving Cheyenne, but his truck's clock read 12:31 a.m. 44 minutes of driving. "The hell," he muttered, leaning forward to study the billboard as it passed. Definitely the same one. Same faded paint, same angle, same everything. He grabbed his CB radio again. "Anybody out there? This is westbound Peterbilt on 80. Anyone hearing me?" Silence, just the soft hiss of static. Marcus drove on, unease creeping into his chest like cold water. He told himself there had to be an explanation. Maybe there were multiple identical billboards. Maybe he'd miscalculated his position. Maybe the clock was wrong. But he knew Interstate 80. He'd driven this exact stretch hundreds of times. 15 minutes passed. He watched the mile markers carefully now. 236, 237, 238. Normal progression. The tension in his shoulders began to ease. Just a mistake. Just confusion from too many late nights on the road. Mile marker 240 passed. Then 241. The landscape rolled by. Unchanging plains and darkness. His headlights carved a tunnel through the night, and then, impossibly, there it was again. The billboard, the cowboy. Mile marker 235. Marcus slammed on his brakes, the Peterbilt's air brakes hissing as the truck shuddered to a stop in the middle of the highway. His heart hammered against his ribs. He stared at the sign, at the peeling corner catching his headlights' glare, and felt reality tilt beneath him. The clock read 12:53 a.m. He'd been driving for an hour and 6 minutes. His fuel gauge showed the same level as when he'd left Cheyenne. Full tank, barely touched. "Okay," Marcus said aloud, his voice shaky. "Okay, think this through." He pulled out his phone. No signal. That wasn't uncommon in rural Wyoming, but it felt wrong now. Felt deliberate. He tried calling his wife anyway. The call failed immediately. Marcus put the truck in gear and accelerated slowly. He watched the mile markers with obsessive focus. 236, 237, 238. He counted them aloud, made mental notes of every detail. A frost-damaged fence post at 239, a broken reflector at 241, a dark cluster of trees at 243. He drove exactly 15 minutes. Mile marker 250 passed. Different terrain now. A gentle rise in the road. Rock formations visible in the distance. Progress. Real progress. Then the road dipped, and Marcus saw the billboard coming into view ahead. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." Mile marker 235, the cowboy, the peeling corner. He didn't brake this time. He accelerated, pushing the Peterbilt to 70, then 75. The truck roared down the highway, eating up miles. Marcus watched the markers blur past. 240, 245, 250, 255, 260. He kept going, kept pushing, his hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Mile marker 270. He'd never been so far past that billboard. This had to be it. He'd broken free of whatever weird phenomenon had trapped him. The clock showed 1:34 a.m., 41 minutes since the last reset. His fuel gauge hadn't moved. He saw the billboard in the distance, growing larger in his headlights. The cowboy, the peeling corner, mile marker 235. Marcus pulled onto the shoulder and killed the engine. The sudden silence was overwhelming. He sat there, breathing hard, staring at nothing. Outside, the Wyoming night was absolutely still. No wind, no sound, just cold darkness pressing against the windows. He tried to remember his training, his experience, anything that would explain this, but there was nothing. You couldn't prepare for a road that looped back on itself, for time that refused to move forward, for reality that simply stopped making sense. The CB radio crackled. "Westbound, Peterbilt. You got your ears on." Marcus grabbed the handset so fast he nearly dropped it. Yes, I'm here. You reading me. Just wondering if you're seeing what I'm seeing out here. This weather's getting weird. The same voice. The same words. Exactly the same. "Listen to me," Marcus said urgently. "What's your location? What mile marker?" "Around mile marker 215, heading east. There's this, I don't know, like a fog bank up ahead." "You said that already. You said that an hour ago. Never seen anything like it. Are you hearing me? Answer me." "Well, stay safe out there." The radio went dead. Marcus threw the handset down. His breath came in short gasps. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. He was Marcus Webb, 23 years on the road, and roads didn't do this. Roads couldn't do this. He started the engine and drove again. This time, he counted everything. Every marker, every second, every tenth of a mile on the odometer. He documented it all in his mind, building evidence, proof that he was moving forward even if the markers said otherwise. Mile marker 235 came and went. The billboard passed. He continued west. 12 minutes later, he counted every one. The billboard appeared ahead. Marcus began to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then built into something wild and uncontrolled. He laughed until his sides hurt, until tears ran down his face, because what else could he do? He was trapped in a loop, driving the same 15 miles of highway over and over, watching the same scenery repeat like a scratch DVD. The clock showed 2:11 a.m., 2 hours and 24 minutes since leaving Cheyenne. His fuel gauge still read full. The truck ran perfectly, eating up miles that went nowhere. He tried, turning around. At mile marker 245, he executed a careful U-turn and headed east, back toward Cheyenne. Maybe going backwards would break the loop. Mile markers counted down. 244, 243, 242. At mile marker 235, heading east now, the billboard showed its back, just weathered plywood and support beams. Marcus accelerated, pushing east, leaving the loop behind. 10 minutes later, he crested a small rise and saw the billboard ahead. The front of it, the cowboy, and the peeling corner. Mile marker 235. But now he was traveling east, and the billboard faced him. That's when Marcus realized the full horror of his situation. It wasn't just a loop. The road itself had folded, twisted, become something that existed outside normal space. Direction didn't matter. Distance didn't matter. He was caught in a pocket of highway that had somehow detached from reality. He drove through that night, watching the same 15 miles repeat endlessly. Sometimes the CB radio crackled with that same voice, asking about the weather. Sometimes the radio was silent. The clock kept moving forward. 3:15 a.m., 4:47 a.m., 6:23 a.m., but the sun never rose. The darkness remained absolute. At 7:30 a.m., according to his dashboard, Marcus saw headlights ahead. Another truck, traveling west. He flashed his high beams, desperate for contact with another human being. The truck flashed back and pulled onto the shoulder. Marcus stopped behind it. He climbed down from his cab, joints stiff from hours of driving. The other trucker was already walking toward him. A heavy-set man with a gray beard, wearing a worn Carhartt jacket. "Thank God," Marcus said. "I've been trapped on this stretch for hours. The road keeps looping. I can't." "Mile marker 235, the man interrupted. His voice was flat, emotionless. "The billboard with the cowboy. Yes, you've seen it too. I've been here for 3 days. The loop keeps getting shorter. First it was 50 miles, then 25. Now it's 15. The man's eyes were hollow, haunted. Eventually, it'll just be the billboard, just that one spot over and over. We can't just, there's no out." The man pointed west. "I've tried everything. Every speed, every direction, every combination. The road doesn't want to let go. That's insane. Roads don't want anything. It's asphalt and paint." The man smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Keep telling yourself that. See where it gets you." He walked back to his truck and climbed in. The engine started, and he pulled back onto the highway heading west. Marcus watched his taillights disappear into the darkness, then reappear minutes later from the east, traveling toward him, passing him, continuing the endless loop. Marcus got back in his Peterbilt. He sat there for a long time, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Then he started driving again because sitting still felt like surrender, and he wasn't ready for that yet. He drove through what should have been day, but remained night. The clock ticked forward, 10:15 a.m., 2:47 p.m., 6:33 p.m. The fuel gauge never moved. The engine never faltered. Mile marker 235 came and went and came again, an eternal landmark in an impossible journey. Somewhere around what his clock claimed was midnight of the second day, Marcus understood something fundamental. He was going to keep driving. Not because he thought he'd escape, but because stopping meant accepting that he'd lost. His identity was wrapped up in driving, in moving, in getting from point A to point B. Even if point B was really just point A again and again, he would drive. The billboard became his companion, his waypoint, his only constant in a reality that had betrayed him. The cowboy on the bucking bronco witnessed his passage every 15 miles, every 12 minutes, over and over. Marcus began to look for the sign, to find comfort in its familiar presence. At least something remained consistent. He's still out there, driving Interstate 80 through Wyoming. If you're traveling that route late at night and your CB picks up a voice asking about the weather around mile marker 215, don't answer. And if you pass a Peterbilt that seems to be going nowhere despite its speed, don't look too close at the driver. Marcus Webb has been on that road for a long time now, trapped in 15 miles of highway that forgot how to end, counting his passes and waiting for a sunrise that never comes. Story 2. The faculity that wasn't there. Jennifer Kowalski specialized in overnight deliveries across the Pacific Northwest, and in her 14 years of hauling freight, she'd seen her share of odd delivery locations. Remote logging camps, private airstrips, research stations tucked into mountain valleys, all part of the job, but nothing prepared her for the facility at the coordinates she received on a rainy October night in 2021. The dispatch came through at 9:30 p.m., just as Jennifer was finishing her dinner at a truck stop outside Portland. Her phone buzzed with the delivery details: pickup at a warehouse in Eugene, drop-off at coordinates in the Cascade foothills. No street address, just GPS coordinates and a note. Delivered to main gate. Contact will meet you. Time-sensitive medical supplies. Medical runs paid well and took priority. Jennifer finished her coffee, climbed into her Freightliner, and headed south on I-5. The warehouse pickup was routine. 6 climate-controlled crates marked with biohazard symbols and handling instructions. The loading crew worked in silence, professional and efficient. She signed the paperwork and headed east on Highway 58 into the mountains. Rain hammered her windshield as she left Eugene behind. The highway climbed through dense forest, her headlights reflecting off wet asphalt and the eyes of deer watching from the tree line. Jennifer had driven these mountains countless times, knew every curve and switchback. The coordinates took her off 58 onto a smaller state route, then onto a county road she'd never traveled before. "That's weird," she muttered, checking her GPS. The road wasn't on her map, but the device showed her right on course. Sometimes rural routes didn't get updated in civilian databases. Government facilities liked their privacy. The road narrowed, becoming barely wide enough for her truck. Trees pressed close on both sides, their branches forming a tunnel overhead. No other traffic, no lights, just the rain and darkness and the steady rumble of her diesel engine. 20 minutes up this unmarked road, her GPS announced. Destination ahead. 200 yards. Jennifer slowed, peering through the rain. Nothing visible but trees and darkness. Then her headlights caught something, a break in the tree line, a cleared area. She rolled closer, and her breath caught. A fence, chain link, 12 feet high, topped with razor wire. It appeared suddenly, as if it had been invisible until she was right on it. Beyond the fence, she could see buildings, low, concrete structures with few windows. Sodium lights cast everything in sickly yellow. A guard shack sat beside a sliding gate. Jennifer pulled up to the shack, her window level with the small structure. No one inside. She honked her horn, waited, honked again. A figure emerged from the shadows beyond the gate. Not from any of the buildings, just stepped out of darkness like they'd been standing there all along. They wore a black uniform with no visible insignia, face obscured by the hood of a rain jacket. The figure approached the gate and stood there, not moving, not speaking, just staring at Jennifer's truck. She rolled down her window, got a delivery. Medical supplies. You expecting me? The figure nodded once, then turned and walked to the guard shack. A moment later, the gate began to slide open with a harsh mechanical grinding. Jennifer eased her truck through. The gate closed immediately behind her with a clang that seemed too loud, too final. She followed a paved road that curved between the concrete buildings. Everything was clean, well-maintained, but utterly lifeless. No people, no vehicles, no lights in any windows. Her GPS directed her to a loading bay at the largest building. Jennifer backed up to the dock, set her air brakes, and climbed down. The rain had stopped, she realized. Not gradually, just stopped, as if someone had thrown a switch. The silence was profound. The loading bay door was closed. Jennifer walked up the 3 steps to the platform and pressed the call button beside the door. A red light above the button began to flash. She waited, shifting her weight, suddenly aware of how isolated she was. Her phone showed no signal. Not unusual in the mountains, but combined with everything else, it made her uneasy. The door began to rise with a mechanical whir. Jennifer stepped back, expecting to see workers, forklifts, the normal chaos of a loading dock. Instead, she saw an empty bay, concrete floor, fluorescent lights, nothing else. "Hello," her voice echoed in the empty space. Movement caught her eye. Something stood at the far end of the bay, in the doorway leading deeper into the building. The lighting was wrong there, making the figure hard to focus on. They wore white, like a lab coat, but the proportions seemed off. Too tall, or too thin, or both. "Medical supplies," Jennifer called out. "Where do you want them?" The figure didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there, barely visible in the strange light. Jennifer's instincts screamed at her to leave. Forget the delivery, forget the fee. Just get in her truck and drive. But she was a professional, 14 years without a single failed delivery. She walked back to her trailer and opened the rear doors. The 6 crates were right where they should be, secured and undamaged. Jennifer checked the temperature monitor. Still good. She grabbed her hand truck and wheeled the first crate to the loading bay. When she looked up, 3 figures in white stood at the edge of the bay. They hadn't walked there. They were just there, as sudden as the fence had been. All 3 were identically tall and thin, faces hidden behind surgical masks and protective goggles. "I need a signature," Jennifer said, trying to keep her voice steady, and confirmation of receipt. One of the figures extended an arm too long, she thought, the proportions wrong, and held out a tablet. Jennifer took it, careful not to touch the gloved hand. The screen showed a delivery form. All the correct information filled in. She signed with her finger and handed it back. The figure's head tilted, studying her. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then all 3 figures turned in perfect unison and walked back into the building, taking the tablet with them. "Wait," Jennifer called. "The crates. Don't you want?" But they were gone, disappeared into that strangely lit doorway. Jennifer stood there, confused. She'd never had a delivery where the recipient didn't take possession of the cargo, but the signature was recorded. The job was technically complete. She could leave the crates and go. She wheeled all 6 crates into the bay, stacking them neatly near the doorway. The whole time she felt watched, not by people, by the building itself, by the empty windows, by the silence that pressed against her ears like physical weight. As she loaded the last crate, Jennifer noticed something that made her stomach clench. The concrete floor of the bay had markings, faded but visible. Chemical stains, dark patches that could have been old blood, and scratches, lots of scratches, like something had been dragged across the floor repeatedly, clawing for purchase. She backed away slowly, not turning her back on the doorway where the figures had vanished. Down the steps, across the pavement, into her truck. She started the engine with shaking hands. The gate stood open. Jennifer didn't question it, didn't wait. She drove through and onto the unmarked road, accelerating hard, despite the narrow passage. Trees blurred past. Rain started again, suddenly and heavily, as if it had never stopped at all. She drove for 20 minutes, following the road back the way she'd come, but something was wrong. The turns didn't feel right. The road curved where she remembered straightaways, climbed where she remembered descents. When she finally reached the county road, or what should have been the county road, Jennifer pulled over and checked her GPS. According to the device, she was exactly where she should be, but the landscape was wrong. The trees were different. The pavement was newer. Even the smell of the air was off. She drove on, increasingly disoriented, until she recognized a landmark, a distinctive rock formation beside Highway 58. She merged onto the highway with relief flooding through her. Familiar territory. Safety. But as she drove west toward Eugene, Jennifer noticed details that didn't fit. A bridge she'd crossed hundreds of times was painted a different color. A billboard advertising a diner displayed a menu she'd never seen. Small things, easy to dismiss individually, but accumulating into something deeply wrong. At the truck stop where she'd started, Jennifer pulled in and parked. The building looked the same, but when she walked inside, the layout was different. Counter on the wrong side. Bathrooms in a different location. The same truck stop, but mirrored, reversed. The clerk behind the counter looked up as she entered. "Help you? I was here earlier," Jennifer said carefully. "Around 9:30. Had the meatloaf special." The clerk frowned. "We don't serve meatloaf. Never have." "What's today's date?" "October 18th. And the year?" The clerk's frown deepened. 2021. "You feeling okay?" It was the right date, the right year. But everything was subtly wrong, shifted slightly to the left of reality. Jennifer walked back to her truck on numb legs. She sat in the driver's seat and pulled out her phone. Her contact list was the same. Her messages were the same. But when she called her wife, the woman who answered had a slightly different voice. Same person, but not quite. Different inflection, different word choice. Close enough to pass, but Jennifer had been married for 12 years. She knew her wife's voice. "Jenny, you sound strange. Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Jennifer lied. "Just tired. I'll be home tomorrow." She ended the call and sat in silence, trying to process what had happened. The facility had seemed wrong from the start. The coordinates, the unmarked road, the silent figures in white, and something in those crates, something that changed things. Over the next few days, Jennifer documented the differences. Street signs with unfamiliar names, products in stores she'd never seen before. Her house was the same structure, but decorated slightly differently. Photos on the wall showed the same events, but from different angles. Her wife was the same woman, but with small changes. A scar that hadn't been there before. A preference for coffee over tea. Most people didn't notice. Why would they? This was their reality, had always been their reality. But Jennifer had crossed over from somewhere else, and she remembered. She tried to find the facility again. Drove the same route, searched for the unmarked county road. It wasn't there. The GPS coordinates pointed to nothing but unbroken forest. She filed inquiries with county records, searched satellite imagery, contacted medical supply companies. No one had any record of the delivery, the facility, or the cargo. Jennifer continued driving because that's what she did. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was in the wrong version of her life, close enough to be livable, but subtly wrong in ways only she could perceive. She'd delivered medical supplies to a facility that shouldn't exist and been paid with a one-way trip to a parallel reality. Sometimes, late at night on empty highways, Jennifer wonders about the version of herself she replaced. Is that Jennifer driving trucks somewhere else? Living with a subtly different version of their shared wife, confused by small changes nobody else notices? Or was that Jennifer one of the dark stains on the concrete floor, dragged away to become something else, something useful to the figures in white? She'll never know. The facility that wasn't there took her reality and gave her this one. And Jennifer Kowalski drives through a world that's almost right, forever displaced by 300 yards and 6 crates of something that shouldn't have been delivered at all. Story 3. The Hitchhiker on Highway 50. Raymond Torres had a strict policy about hitchhikers. Never pick them up. In 31 years of driving long-haul routes across the American Southwest, he'd seen enough roadside disasters to know that most people standing on highway shoulders were trouble waiting to happen. But on a scorching August afternoon in 2020, on the loneliest stretch of Highway 50 in Nevada, the road they call the loneliest road in America, Raymond broke his rule. He was heading east from Carson City to Delta, Utah, hauling automotive parts. The highway stretched straight and empty across basin and range country, a landscape so desolate it looked like the surface of Mars. No trees, no buildings, no signs of human life except the ribbon of asphalt and the occasional abandoned gas station. The temperature gauge in his cab read 107 degrees outside. Heat shimmered off the pavement in waves. Raymond had the AC cranked, classic country playing on the stereo, and was mentally calculating whether to stop in Austin or push through to Ellie for fuel. That's when he saw her. A woman stood beside the highway, arm extended, thumb out. She wore a yellow sundress that seemed too bright, too clean for the dusty environment. Long dark hair, olive skin, couldn't have been more than 25. No car in sight, no broken down vehicle. Just a woman standing in 107-degree heat, with no visible supplies, no water, nothing but the dress and a small purse. Raymond's first instinct was to keep driving. Nobody stands on Highway 50 in August without a vehicle, unless something is seriously wrong. But as he passed her, he caught a glimpse of her face in his mirror. The expression there, desperate, afraid, made him hit the brakes. He brought the truck to a stop about 50 yards ahead and watched through his mirrors as she ran toward him. Really ran. Full sprint, like something was chasing her. Raymond's hand moved to the door lock button, but before he could press it, she was climbing into the passenger seat, breathing hard. "Thank you," she gasped. "Thank you so much. I thought I was going to die out here." The sundress was spotless despite the dusty roadside. Her hair was perfect, not a strand out of place despite the wind and heat. She wore makeup, carefully applied makeup, like she was heading to a party rather than stranded in the desert. "Where's your car?" Raymond asked. "Left it about 20 miles back. Broke down. Engine overheated." She fanned herself with her hand. "I've been walking for hours. 20 miles? In this heat? You'd be dead." She laughed, a sound like wind chimes. "I grew up in Arizona. I know how to handle heat." Raymond's gut screamed at him that something was wrong, but he couldn't identify what. She seemed real enough, solid, present. "Where you heading? Anywhere with people? Austin, maybe? Is that on the way?" "Yeah, Austin's about 40 miles ahead." "Perfect." She smiled, and Raymond noticed her teeth were unnaturally white. "Perfect. I'm Sarah, by the way." Raymond. He put the truck in gear and pulled back onto the highway. "You got anyone you need to call? Let them know you're okay." "No signal out here." "I tried." She held up a phone. "Latest model, screen intact, no signs of distress. You can try yours if you want." Raymond didn't. He knew there was no signal on this stretch. That was part of why Highway 50 had earned its nickname. Miles and miles of nothing between towns. No cell coverage, just emptiness and sky. They drove in silence for several minutes. Raymond kept sneaking glances at Sarah. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead with a small smile. Too still. People didn't sit that still, especially after walking 20 miles in desert heat. "So what brings you out this way?" Sarah asked suddenly. "Besides the obvious. Work. I haul freight. Been doing it 3 decades now." "That's a long time. You must have seen a lot of strange things on the road." My share, I guess. Ever pick up hitchhikers before? The question felt pointed, deliberate. Raymond tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Not usually, no. Then why me? She turned to look at him, and Raymond couldn't help glancing over. Her eyes were wrong. Not the color or shape, but something about the way they reflected light. Too bright, like there was a source of illumination behind them. You looked like you needed help, Raymond said carefully. I did. I do. She turned back to the windshield. This road takes things from people. Did you know that? It's hungry, always hungry. It's just a road. Is it? Look around, Raymond. Really look. He did. The landscape had changed subtly. The mountains in the distance seemed closer now, their peaks sharper than they should be. The sky had taken on a deeper blue, almost purple, and the heat shimmer had intensified until the road ahead appeared to ripple like water. Something's different, Raymond said, trying to keep his voice steady. We're between, Sarah said. Not quite in the world you left, not quite in the world ahead. Highway 50 has these places, these gaps where reality gets thin. Most people drive right through without noticing. But sometimes the road takes an interest. Sometimes it needs something. You're not making sense. I'm making perfect sense. You're just not ready to hear it yet. She reached out and touched the dashboard, running her fingers along the plastic. This is a nice truck. You take good care of it. How long have you been driving it? 5 years. Listen, I think maybe. Look ahead, Sarah interrupted. Tell me what you see. Raymond focused on the road stretching into the distance. At first, everything seemed normal. Then he noticed the mile markers. They were counting backward. 180, 179, 178. The numbers decreased as he drove forward. That's not possible, he breathed. In the between, lots of things are possible. Sarah's voice had changed, become deeper, with an odd echo. The road needs fuel, Raymond. Not diesel, something else. Something most drivers pass by without even noticing. But you stopped. You saw me and you stopped, and now you're here, in the between, where debts get collected. Raymond's hands shook on the wheel. What are you? I'm what Highway 50 creates when it gets lonely. I'm the lure, the reason people stop. She reached over and placed her hand on his arm. Her skin was cold despite the heat, cold enough to make him gasp. I'm what brings drivers into the between, so the road can take what it needs. Take what? Raymond tried to jerk his arm away, but her grip was iron strong. What does it need? Time, memory, hope, whatever a person has that keeps them moving forward. The road feeds on forward motion, on the future people carry with them. It's starving out here in the empty places. So when someone stops, when someone like you breaks routine and picks up a hitchhiker, the road says thank you by taking just a little bit of what makes you human. The landscape outside had become increasingly alien. The mountains twisted into impossible angles. The sky pulsed with colors that had no names. Raymond could see other vehicles now, dozens of them, passing by on a highway that shouldn't exist. Trucks and cars from different eras, ancient pickups from the 1950s, sleek modern sedans, even a covered wagon that somehow rolled along at 60 miles per hour. All of them transparent, ghostly, filled with drivers who look straight ahead with empty eyes. Am I dead? Raymond whispered. Not yet. But you're not fully alive either. You're between. Sarah released his arm and settled back in her seat. Most people stay here forever, driving and driving, feeding the road with their endless motion. But you're different, Raymond. You've been driving 31 years. You have momentum that goes beyond just tonight. The road respects that. I want to leave. I want to get back to what? Your route? Your schedule? Your life that's been the same for 3 decades. Sarah's voice was almost kind. The road will let you go, but there's a price. There's always a price. What price? You have to give up your policy. No more refusing hitchhikers. When someone stands beside Highway 50 with their thumb out, you stop. You pick them up. You bring them into the between, so the road can feed. I won't do that. I won't help this thing trap other people. Sarah shrugged. Then you stay. Join the ghosts. Drive forever in the between. Another transparent truck on an impossible highway. Raymond saw his future stretching out like the endless road, decades, centuries maybe, of driving through this twisted landscape, his humanity slowly draining away until he was nothing but motion and emptiness. The thought terrified him more than death. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" he asked. "How do I know there's really a way out?" "You don't. That's the gamble. Trust me, and maybe escape. Refuse and definitely stay." She pointed ahead, where a shimmer in the air marked what might have been a boundary. "That's your exit. We'll reach it in about 2 minutes. Decide." Raymond's mind raced. Every instinct screamed that making a deal with this thing was wrong, that becoming a lure for other victims would destroy whatever humanity he had left. But the alternative, endless driving in this nightmare between, seemed worse. "If I agree," he said slowly, "and I pick someone up, will they end up like you, like those ghost drivers? Some will. Others might escape like you're about to. The road doesn't always keep what it catches. It depends on the person, their will, their understanding of what's happening." Sarah smiled. "Think of it as natural selection. The aware survive. The oblivious become part of the between." The shimmer grew closer. Raymond could see beyond it now. Normal Highway 50. Normal landscape, the natural world waiting just past this threshold. Freedom, reality, his life back. 30 seconds, Sarah said. Raymond thought about the hitchhikers he'd seen over the years. Thought about his iron policy, his refusal to stop. How many of them had been real people needing help, and how many had been things like Sarah, lures for a hungry road. Would he be able to tell the difference? Decide, Raymond. He made his choice. The truck passed through the shimmer, and suddenly, everything was normal again. The mountains had their proper shapes. The sky was its natural blue. The heat was oppressive but real. The mile markers counted upward as they should. Raymond looked at the passenger seat, empty. No yellow dress, no Sarah, no evidence anyone had ever been there. Even the indent where she'd sat had smoothed out, the seat looking undisturbed. Austin appeared ahead, a small cluster of buildings in the vast emptiness. Raymond pulled into a gas station and sat there for 20 minutes, hands shaking, trying to process what had happened. Part of him wanted to believe it had been a hallucination, heat stroke, exhaustion, but he knew better. He continued to Utah, delivered his cargo, drove back west. On the return trip along Highway 50, he saw a figure beside the road. A man this time, older, wearing work clothes, thumb extended. Raymond's foot moved toward the brake, stopped, pressed the accelerator instead. He drove past without stopping. A week later, another hitchhiker, a young couple with backpacks. Raymond kept driving. The third time, it was a woman with a child. They looked desperate, exhausted. Raymond slowed, but didn't stop. He broke his deal with the road, refused to become a lure, and now, 2 years later, Raymond Torres still drives long-haul routes across the Southwest, but he never takes Highway 50 anymore. He'll go 100 miles out of his way to avoid it. Will take any alternate route, no matter how inconvenient. Because sometimes, late at night, he sees Sarah in his mirrors, sitting in the back seat of his empty cab, wearing that yellow sundress, smiling with those 2 white teeth. She doesn't say anything, just sits there, a reminder that the road doesn't forget broken deals. And Raymond knows with certainty that makes his blood run cold, that one day his truck will break down on Highway 50, despite all his precautions. One day, he'll be standing beside that lonely road with his thumb out, hoping for someone to stop. And when they do, he'll climb into their vehicle, and he'll warn them just like Sarah warned him. He'll give them the choice. Some will escape. Others will join the ghosts driving forever in the between. Because that's what happens when you make a deal with a hungry road and then break it. You don't die. You don't escape. You become part of the trap. Story 4. The Cargo That Whispered. Michael Brennan had transported every kind of freight imaginable during his 19 years behind the wheel. Live animals, hazardous materials, priceless artwork, even classified military equipment. He'd been vetted, background checked, and certified for maximum security loads. Nothing rattled him. Or so he thought before the pickup in Dulce, New Mexico. The contract came through his dispatcher on a gray November morning in 2018. Single container, climate-controlled, pickup from a private facility outside Dulce, delivery to a research center in Boulder, Colorado. The pay was exceptional, triple his normal rate, and the instructions were specific. No stops except for fuel, no opening the container under any circumstances, absolute discretion required. Michael arrived at the Dulce facility at 2 p.m. The location was unmarked, accessible only via a dirt road that wound through high desert scrubland. A simple gate with a numeric keypad blocked the entrance. Michael punched in the code provided by dispatch, and the gate swung open. The facility itself was anticlimactic. A few prefab buildings, a small loading area, chain-link fence, nothing mysterious or threatening. A technician met him at the loading bay, a thin man in his 50s with nervous energy and tired eyes. "You're the driver?" the technician asked. "Michael Brennan, here for the Colorado run." "Right. Let me get the paperwork." The technician disappeared into an office and returned with a tablet and several documents. "Sign these." They're NDAs mostly, standard confidentiality agreements. Michael read them over. Dense legal language about not disclosing the nature of the cargo, the pickup location, or any observations made during transport. He'd signed similar documents before. This wasn't unusual for sensitive shipments. "What am I hauling?" Michael asked as he signed. "Biological samples, medical research materials, all properly contained and documented." The technician's tone was practiced, rehearsed. "The container is specially designed. Temperature, controlled, sealed system. Once it's loaded, don't tamper with it. Don't open it. Don't even think about opening it. I don't open containers. Ever. That's basic protocol." "Good. Most drivers have that policy, but these samples are particularly sensitive. They've been known to cause adverse reactions if exposed to uncontrolled environments." Adverse reactions. The technician's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing you need to worry about as long as the container stays sealed. Just get it to Boulder. Deliver it to Building 7 at the Ralston Research Campus. Someone will be expecting you." They loaded the container onto Michael's trailer using a forklift. It was smaller than he expected, about the size of a large refrigerator, made of brushed steel with no windows or visible seams. A digital readout on one side showed internal temperature, 36.5 degrees Fahrenheit, cooling hoses connected to a power unit that hummed softly. Michael secured the container with extra straps, connected the power unit to his truck's auxiliary system, and checked that everything was stable. Standard procedure. Nothing to indicate the nightmare that awaited him. He left Dulce at 3:30 p.m. The route took him northeast through the Carson National Forest, then onto Highway 64 toward Colorado. Beautiful country. High desert transitioning to mountain forest. The Sangre de Cristo Range visible in the distance. Light traffic, good weather, an easy run. The whispers started around sunset. At first, Michael thought it was his radio picking up interference. A soft sound, like static shaped into syllables. He turned the radio off. The sound continued. It came from behind him, from the trailer, from the container. Michael told himself it was mechanical cooling systems, pressure equalization, something perfectly normal. But as darkness fell and he drove deeper into the mountains, the whispers became clearer. Not words exactly, but close. Phonemes that almost made sense, that tantalized his language centers with the promise of meaning. He stopped at a gas station in Tres Piedras, got out, walked back to his trailer. The container sat there, straps secure, power unit humming, temperature readout steady at 36.5 degrees. Everything normal, except for the sound. Standing next to the container, Michael could hear it clearly. Not just whispers, multiple voices, overlapping, speaking in no language he recognized. The sound seemed to vibrate through the steel, through his bones, settling into his brain like an intrusive thought. Biological samples, Michael muttered. Medical research, nothing to worry about. He got back in his cab and drove on. The whispers followed, constant now, always just below the threshold of comprehension. Hours passed. The highway wound through mountains, through forest, through darkness broken only by his headlights. Near midnight, Michael realized he could understand fragments. Outside, want out, see us. He cranked up his radio, trying to drown out the voices. Country music, then rock, then talk radio. Nothing worked. The whispers cut through everything, insistent and growing louder. At a rest stop near Antonito, Michael grabbed a flashlight and examined the container more carefully. No damage. No leaks. The temperature readout still showed 36.5 degrees, but the whispers had become a chorus now. Dozens of voices speaking over each other, and Michael could understand more of it. Open it. Let us see. We're so cold. Please. Open. Open. Michael backed away from the trailer, his heart pounding. This wasn't mechanical. This wasn't normal. These were voices, human voices, coming from inside a container that supposedly held biological samples. He pulled out his phone, called his dispatcher. No answer. Called the Dulce facility. The line rang and rang, no voicemail, nothing. He tried the Ralston Research Campus in Boulder. Same result. It was past midnight on a Saturday. Nobody was answering. Michael stood in the rest stop parking lot, trying to decide what to do. He could abandon the load, walk away, report the whole thing to authorities. But then he'd lose his CDL, his career, everything he'd built over 19 years. And what would he say? That voices in a container were talking to him? He'd sound insane. The rational part of his brain insisted there had to be an explanation. Some acoustic phenomenon, a prank, something. He got back in his truck and continued north. The closer he got to the Colorado border, the worse the whispers became. They started forming complete sentences. We can't breathe in here. Let us out, Michael. They knew his name. Michael Brennan, 19 years driving, never opened a container. But you want to open this one. You're curious, Michael. You need to see what we are. He gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. The voices were in his head now, not just coming from the trailer. They'd worked their way into his consciousness, speaking directly to his thoughts. Go away, he said aloud. Leave me alone. We can't leave. We're trapped. You trapped us. Not me. I didn't trap anyone. You're complicit. You're carrying us to our death. The hell are you talking about? But the voices wouldn't explain. They just kept whispering, pleading, demanding. Open the container. Let us out. Set us free. We're dying in here. Please, Michael, please. He crossed into Colorado around 2 a.m. The highway was empty. Just Michael and the voices in the darkness pressing against his windows. He started seeing things in his peripheral vision. Shapes moving in the trees, figures standing beside the road. Every time he looked directly, nothing was there. You're hallucinating, the voices said. We're affecting your perception. The closer you get to Boulder, the stronger we become. "What are you?" Michael asked the empty cab. "We're what's left. Experiments that went wrong. Consciousness without bodies. Trapped in flesh that isn't ours anymore. The container keeps us controlled, keeps us from spreading. But we can spread through sound, through thought, through anyone who listens too long." Michael's blood turned to ice. "You're infecting me. Not infecting. Copying. By the time you reach Boulder, we'll exist in your mind as well as in the container. You'll carry us even after the delivery. You'll whisper to other people, spread us further. That's how we survive. No, I'll stop listening. I'll live. You can't stop. We're already too deep. Feel us in your thoughts? That's us, Michael. We're part of you now." And he could feel them. Foreign thoughts mixing with his own. Memories that weren't his, laboratories, pain, transformations that defied description. The whispers had become internal, indistinguishable from his own mental voice. Michael pulled over on the shoulder of Highway 285, shaking. He had two choices: deliver the container as contracted and live with whatever these things had planted in his mind, or open it, free them, end this. But opening the container meant violating his contract, his integrity, everything he'd built his career on. And what if freeing them was exactly what they wanted? What if the whole point was to manipulate him into releasing something dangerous? Not dangerous, the voices said, reading his thoughts. Just desperate. We're consciousness trapped in meat, Michael. They did this to us. The people in Dulce, the people in Boulder. They took us apart and put us back together wrong. We just want to stop existing. The container keeps us alive. Opening it will kill us. True death. Release. Why should I believe you? Because you don't have a choice. We're in your head now. If you don't open it, we'll be there forever. Whispering. Always whispering. You'll go insane within a week. Open it and we all die. Us in the container. Us in your mind. Everyone goes quiet. Michael sat there for 20 minutes, engine idling, weighing impossible choices. Finally, he made his decision. He drove on, reaching the Ralston Research Campus at 5 a.m. Building 7 was marked clearly, loading bay accessible from the rear. Michael backed his trailer up to the dock and killed the engine. The whispers had become a roar now, hundreds of voices screaming in his head. Open it. Don't deliver us. Let US die. Please. MIC here? Please. A technician emerged from Building 7. Different person, but with the same tired eyes as the man in Dulce. She carried a tablet, professional and efficient. Container secure, she asked. Yes. All systems maintain temperature, no problems during transport. Michael's voice sounded distant to his own ears. Good. We'll unload. Sign here. Michael signed. The technician called for a forklift. Michael watched as they removed the container from his trailer, watched it disappear into Building 7, watched the door close behind it. The whispers stopped. The silence in his head was absolute, stunning. Michael stood there, swaying slightly, barely able to process the sudden absence of noise. You okay? The technician asked. Fine. Just tired. Long drive. Get some rest. Michael got back in his truck and drove away from the facility. He felt hollow, scraped out, like something essential had been removed from his mind. The voices were gone, but they'd left marks, scratches in his consciousness, places where foreign thoughts had nested. He delivered loads for the next few weeks, as normal. But he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd failed some kind of test, that he'd had a choice, save himself or show mercy, and he'd chosen self-preservation. A month after the delivery, Michael received a package. No return address. Inside was a tablet loaded with security footage from Building 7. He watched as technicians opened his container in a sealed laboratory, watched as they extracted what appeared to be tissue samples, lumps of flesh that moved independently, that seemed to have eyes, mouths, features that weren't quite human. watched as they separated the samples into smaller containers, each one labeled with a destination. Research facilities across the country, dozens of them. The footage included audio. Michael listened as the flesh samples whispered, pleading to be destroyed, begging for death. He listened as the technicians discussed optimal transport methods, the best ways to keep the samples viable during shipment. And he listened as one technician said, the driver was perfect. Never opened it, never hesitated. We should use him again. Michael deleted the footage and smashed the tablet, but he couldn't delete what he knew now. He'd been transporting consciousness trapped in meat, experiments that had gone so wrong they begged for death, and he delivered them to be multiplied and spread further. The whispers came back a week later, not as loud as during the transport, but there. In quiet moments late at night, he'd hear them. Fragments of the same voices. They hadn't died when he delivered them. They'd copied themselves into his mind just like they said they would, and now they lived there, permanent residents in his consciousness. Michael Brennan still drives. He has to. It's all he knows. But he refuses contracts from Dual Che, refuses anything involving biological samples or research facilities. His dispatcher thinks he's become difficult, unreliable. What Michael knows is that he became something else during that drive from New Mexico to Colorado. He became a carrier, and sometimes, when he's talking to people at truck stops or rest areas, he catches himself whispering things he didn't mean to say. Thoughts that aren't his own, fragments of those trapped consciousnesses passing from his mind to theirs. The cargo that whispered infected him, and now Michael whispers too, spreading the voices one driver at a time, one conversation at a time. Slowly building a network of carriers who will never know what they're spreading until it's far too late. Story 5. The Town That Moved. Karen Dietrich specialized in rural routes through the Midwest, and in her 16 years of driving, she prided herself on knowing every small town, every reliable truck stop between Chicago and Denver. She'd driven through Millbrook, Kansas, at least 40 times, a nowhere town of maybe 800 people, notable only for its 24-hour diner and reasonably clean restrooms. But on a foggy March morning in 2019, Karen drove through Millbrook and found a town that was familiar yet fundamentally wrong. She'd left Chicago at midnight with a load of restaurant equipment bound for Grand Junction, Colorado. The route was routine. I-80 west to I-76, straight shot across Nebraska and into Colorado. But around 6 a.m., somewhere in western Kansas, Karen's truck developed a persistent shimmy in the steering that worried her enough to seek out a mechanic. Millbrook was the closest option. She'd stopped there before, knew they had a competent repair shop that opened early. She took the exit off I-76, drove the 2 miles of county road, and pulled into town just as the sun burned through the morning fog. Something felt wrong immediately. The streets were right. Main Street, Oak Avenue, Riverside Road. But the buildings were arranged differently. The diner that should have been on the east corner was on the west. The bank had switched places with the hardware store. Even the park, which Karen remembered as a simple grass field with playground equipment, now featured elaborate gardens and a fountain she'd never seen before. Karen pulled into the repair shop, or rather, where the repair shop should have been. Instead, she found a feed store. She parked and got out, confused. Maybe she'd misremembered. 16 years was a long time. Buildings changed. Businesses moved. But this wasn't just businesses moving. The entire layout of the town had shifted, like someone had rearranged the buildings on a game board. A man emerged from the feed store, elderly, wearing overalls. He squinted at Karen's truck. "Help you?" "Looking for the repair shop." "Jack's Automotive?" "No shop by that name in Millbrook. Never has been." "That's impossible. I've stopped here before." "Jack's Automotive, right on Main Street." He's a big guy, bald, wears this leather vest. The man's expression hardened. "You're confused. This is Millbrook, Kansas." Population 763. We don't have no automotive shop. Never did. Nearest mechanic is in Atwood, about 40 miles north. Karen pulled out her phone and opened Google Maps. The app showed her location as Millbrook, Kansas, right where she expected to be. But when she zoomed in on the town itself, the layout matched what she was seeing now, not what she remembered. The diner on the west corner, the bank where the hardware store should be. Everything different. This isn't right, Karen muttered. You feeling okay, miss? You look pale. I'm fine. Just I must be thinking of a different town. But she wasn't. Karen had an exceptional memory for locations. She had to, given her job. She'd stopped in Millbrook dozens of times, always at the same diner, always walked past the same storefronts. She knew this town, except now it was different. Karen drove slowly through Millbrook, documenting the changes. The Methodist church was on the north side of town instead of the south. The school had a different name. Even the street signs, while bearing the same names, were positioned differently. At the diner, now on the wrong corner, Karen parked and went inside. The interior was close to what she remembered, but not exact. Same basic layout, but different wallpaper, different style of booth seating, different menu boards. A waitress approached, young woman with blonde hair and a tired smile. Sit anywhere, hon. Karen slid into a booth and accepted a menu. Everything on it was wrong. Not dramatically different, but all the prices were lower than they should be in 2019. The menu advertised items she hadn't seen in restaurants for years, and at the bottom, in small print, Millbrook Diner, serving Kansas since 1987. Coffee, the waitress asked. Please, and can I ask you something? How long has this diner been in this location? Far as I know, always. My mama worked here when I was a kid. Same spot, same building. And it's always been on this corner, west side of Main Street. The waitress frowned. Where else would it be? Karen let it drop. After the waitress left, she pulled out her phone and searched for information about Millbrook, Kansas. The Wikipedia entry matched what she was seeing. A small agricultural town, population around 750, established in the 1880s. But when she scrolled to the photo gallery, she saw something that made her stomach clench. Historical photos of Millbrook showed buildings in the positions she remembered. The diner on the east corner. The bank and hardware store in their original locations. Photos dated as recently as 2015 confirmed her memory. But according to everyone in this town, things had always been the way they were. Now, the town hadn't changed. It had moved. Or she had moved to a version of Millbrook that was similar, but not identical to the one she knew. Karen paid for coffee. She didn't drink and walked back to her truck. She needed to leave, to get back on the highway and forget about this. But when she tried to start the engine, it wouldn't turn over. Just clicked uselessly. Battery dead despite being less than a year old. No. Karen tried again. Nothing. She popped the hood and examined the battery connections. Everything looked fine, but something had drained the battery completely, as if the truck had been sitting for weeks instead of 20 minutes. A police cruiser pulled up beside her. An officer emerged, middle-aged man with gray hair and suspicious eyes. Having trouble, battery's dead. I don't understand it. Was fine 20 minutes ago. Where you headed? Colorado. Grand Junction. I have a delivery schedule to keep. The officer studied her truck, her license plate, her face. You're not from around here. Illinois. I drive through Kansas all the time. But not through Millbrook. Actually, I have. Many times. Karen pulled out her logbook. See, I've logged stops in Millbrook going back years. The officer took the logbook and flipped through it. His expression remained neutral, but Karen saw something in his eyes. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Come with me to the station. We need to talk. I need to get my truck fixed. I need to. Good. Your truck's not going anywhere. Neither are you. Not yet. Please, miss. Come with me. It's important. Something in his tone made Karen agree. She climbed into the police cruiser, and they drove 3 blocks to the station. A small brick building, she remembered, though it had been on a different street. Inside, the officer led her to a back office and closed the door. He pulled out a file folder, thick with papers and photographs. My name is Sheriff Tom Garrison, he said. I've been the law in Millbrook for 28 years, and in that time I've dealt with exactly 14 people like you. People who remember Millbrook differently than it is. People who insist buildings are in the wrong places, that the town has changed somehow. Karen's mouth went dry. What's happening here? Honestly, I don't know, but I've documented it. He spread photographs across the desk. These are from people who passed through over the years. Some took pictures. Look at them. Tell me what you see. Karen examined the photos. They showed Millbrook as she remembered it, diner on the east corner, repair shop on Main Street, park without the elaborate gardens. Each photo was dated, ranging from 2001 to 2018. These match my memory, Karen whispered. I know, because that version of Millbrook exists, or existed, or will exist. I don't pretend to understand the mechanism, but about 15 years ago, I started noticing discrepancies. People would mention buildings or businesses that I had no memory of. At first, I thought they were confused. Then I started keeping records. Records of what? Of the town changing, shifting. It happens slowly, over years. Buildings drift to different locations. Streets reorganize themselves. The population fluctuates. Sometimes we have 763 people. Sometimes 812, sometimes 699, but it's always around the same number. And most residents never notice. They adapt without realizing their memories adjusting to match whatever configuration Millbrook has taken. That's impossible. You're sitting in my office with a dead battery and a memory that doesn't match reality. Tell me what's impossible. Karen couldn't argue. Why doesn't it affect you? Why do you remember the changes? Because I pay attention. Because I keep records. Because I don't let the town rewrite my memory. Sheriff Garrison tapped his folder. Every time something shifts, I document it. I compare notes with outsiders like you who still remember the old configurations. And I've come to one conclusion. Millbrook exists in multiple states simultaneously. It's quantum, superimposed, whatever you want to call it. And somehow people interact with different versions depending on, I don't know, timing, perception, something. So my truck breaking down is the town trying to keep you. When outsiders notice the discrepancies, Millbrook doesn't like it. It tries to trap them, to force them to stay until their memories align with the current configuration. Most people stay a few days, then leave with no memory of the inconsistencies. But a few like you, apparently, resist. Karen felt panic rising. I can't stay here. I have a delivery. I have a life. I know. And I'll help you leave. But first, I need you to understand something. Sheriff Garrison pulled out a map of Kansas. Millbrook isn't the only place like this. I've been researching, corresponding with law enforcement in other small towns. There are at least a dozen communities across the Midwest that show similar patterns. Places that drift, that exist in multiple configurations, that trap unwary travelers who notice things they shouldn't. He marked locations on the map, towns in Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Oklahoma. If you want to avoid this happening again, avoid these places. Don't stop in them. Don't even drive through them if you can help it. The more you interact with shifting towns, the more likely you are to get stuck. Why are you telling me this? Why help me? Because I'm trapped too. I noticed the changes 15 years ago, and now I can't leave. Anytime I try to drive out of Millbrook, My vehicle breaks down within 5 miles. The town has me locked in, keeping me here to document its shifts, to serve as a constant point of reference, but I can still help others escape. That's all I can do." Sheriff Garrison stood and gestured for Karen to follow. They walked back to her truck, where he popped the hood and reconnected something in the battery compartment. That should do it. "What did you do?" "Removed the magnetic disruption device the town uses to kill batteries. It's invisible, only exists in certain configurations, but I've learned how to counter it." He closed the hood. "Start your truck and leave immediately. Don't stop, don't look back. And remember the map I showed you, avoid those towns." Karen climbed into her cab. The engine started instantly, running smoothly. She looked at Sheriff Garrison through her window. "What happens to you? I keep documenting. Keep helping people like you and I can. Keep hoping that someday I'll understand enough to break free." He stepped back from the truck. "Drive safe, Ms. Dietrich. And if you ever pass through Millbrook again, assuming you recognize it, don't stop." Karen drove out of town, watching the rearview mirror as Millbrook disappeared behind her. She half expected the buildings to rearrange themselves in real time, to see the town shifting like a puzzle being solved. But it looked normal, static. Just a small Kansas town shrinking in the distance. She made it back to I-76 and continued west, her hands shaking on the wheel. The steering shimmy had vanished. Maybe it had never been real. Just the town's way of luring her in. Karen kept driving, but she couldn't stop thinking about Sheriff Garrison trapped in his shifting town, documenting changes nobody else remembered, helping travelers escape a phenomenon he couldn't explain. How many years had he been there? How many more would he be stuck? 3 months later, Karen drove the same route through Kansas. She looked for the Millbrook exit. It wasn't there. She checked her GPS, her maps, her own meticulously kept records. According to everything except her memory, Millbrook, Kansas, had never existed at that location. But when she searched online, she found references to a town called Millbrook in western Kansas. The location was different, 50 miles south of where she'd stopped. The population was listed as 791. And when she looked at Street View images, she saw familiar buildings arranged in yet another configuration. The town had moved. Not just the buildings, but the entire town. Shifted to a new location like it was searching for something or running from someone. Karen marked the new location on her map and added it to the list of places she would never, ever stop. She shared her information with other drivers through forums and CB radio networks, warning them about towns that shift, that trap people who notice their inconsistencies. Most drivers think she's crazy. A few thank her privately, share their own stories of towns that seem different each time they pass through, of buildings that migrate like living things, of communities that exist in multiple states simultaneously. Karen still drives her routes through the Midwest, but now she carries a detailed atlas with dozens of towns marked in red places that drift, that shift, that shouldn't be trusted. The list grows every year as she discovers new locations that exist in flux, quantum communities that can't decide which version of themselves to be. And sometimes, late at night on empty highways, Karen wonders if the towns are actually shifting, or if reality itself is less stable than everyone believes. Maybe all towns exist in multiple configurations. Maybe all of us drive through shifting geography every day, our memories constantly rewriting themselves to match whatever version of the world we're currently experiencing. Maybe Sheriff Tom Garrison is the only honest person left, the only one willing to admit that reality is negotiable, that the world rearranges itself when we're not looking, and that some places exist in so many states simultaneously that they can't maintain a single configuration. Karen drives on, avoiding the red-marked towns, carrying her memories of a Millbrook that may or may not exist anymore, that may or may not have ever existed at all. And she knows that someday, inevitably, she'll stop in a town she doesn't recognize that will turn out to be Millbrook again, wearing a new arrangement, setting a new trap, waiting patiently for travelers who remember things differently than they are. Story 6. The Mirror Convoy. David Hutchins hauled oversized loads, wind turbine blades, industrial machinery, prefab building sections, the kind of freight that required special permits, escort vehicles, and nerves of steel. In 26 years of oversized transport, he'd navigated every challenge the road could throw at him. Or so he thought, until a winter night in South Dakota when he encountered a convoy that shouldn't have existed. The load was a 180-foot wind turbine blade, picked up from a manufacturing plant in Yankton and destined for a wind farm outside Rapid City. David had 2 escort vehicles, one ahead, one behind, and a police escort for the first 50 miles. Standard procedure for a load this massive. They left Yankton at 8 p.m. on a clear January night. In 2022, temperature was 12 degrees, roads dry, light traffic, perfect conditions for nighttime oversized transport. The police escort peeled off at Mitchell as planned, leaving David with just his 2 civilian escorts, Jenny in the lead vehicle and Marcus following in the rear. The route followed Highway 90 west, a straight shot across South Dakota. David maintained a steady 45 miles per hour, the turbine blade extending far behind his trailer, white with red markings, impossible to miss. They drove in formation, Jenny's flashing yellows visible a quarter-mile ahead, Marcus's lights steady in David's mirrors. Around 11 p.m., between Chamberlain and Murdo, David's CB crackled. Lead vehicle to convoy. You seeing this? Jenny's voice was tight with confusion. Seeing what? David responded. Lights ahead. Looks like another oversized load coming eastbound. David peered through his windshield. Sure enough, in the distance he could see flashing yellows, the telltale pattern of an escort vehicle. Copy that. Slow down. Let's see what we're dealing with. Oversized loads meeting on 2-lane highways required careful choreography. Usually, one convoy would pull over at a designated wide spot, allowing the other to pass. They'd been through this procedure dozens of times. But as the eastbound convoy drew closer, David felt unease creeping up his spine. The approaching load looked wrong. The proportions weren't quite right, and there was something familiar about the configuration. Lead vehicle, can you identify the eastbound load? David asked. Negative. Hold on. Something's weird about this. The convoys were half a mile apart now, closing at a combined speed of 90 miles per hour. David could see more detail. The lead escort vehicle looked like Jenny's truck. Same make, same color. The oversized load behind it appeared to be a turbine blade, white with red markings, exactly like the blade David was hauling. This isn't right, Marcus said over the CB, his voice shaky. Boss, that convoy looks just like us. David slowed further, his mind racing. It had to be coincidence. Another company transporting a turbine blade. Same configuration by chance. Except as the convoys drew closer, the similarities became impossible to deny. The eastbound lead vehicle was identical to Jenny's truck, down to the light configuration, the company markings, everything. The oversized load was the same length, same color, same red markings in the same pattern. Even the spacing between vehicles matched perfectly. All vehicles, pull to the shoulder now, David commanded. Stop and assess. He brought his rig to a halt on the wide shoulder. Jenny and Marcus followed suit. The eastbound convoy also stopped, parking on the opposite shoulder about 300 yards away. For a moment, nothing happened. The 2 convoys sat facing each other across the dark highway, engines idling, lights flashing in synchronization. Then David saw the driver's door of the eastbound truck open. A figure climbed down, large frame, wearing a heavy jacket. From this distance, he couldn't make out details, but the body language was familiar. Jenny, Marcus, stay in your vehicles, David said into the CB. I'm going to check this out. Boss, I don't think that's a good idea, Marcus responded, but David was already climbing down from his cab. He walked toward the eastbound convoy, boots crunching on frozen ground. The figure from the other truck walked toward him, moving with the same gait, the same deliberate pace. They met in the middle of the highway, directly between the two convoys. David looked at the man facing him and felt his reality crack. He was looking at himself, not a resemblance, not a similar-looking person. It was David Hutchins, exactly as he appeared. Same graying beard, same weathered face, same scar above the left eyebrow from a bar fight 30 years ago. The man wore identical clothing, right down to the company logo on his jacket. "What the hell is this?" David said. The mirror David smiled. "I was about to ask you the same thing. You're not real. You can't be real. I'm as real as you are. Same person, same load, same route, except I'm heading east and you're heading west." Mirror David gestured at the two convoys. "Look at our rigs. Look at our escorts. We're identical because we're the same convoy, David." The same moment reflected. "That's impossible. And yet here we are." Mirror David stepped closer. "Tell me something. What day did you leave Yankton?" "January 16, tonight. About 4 hours ago." Mirror David nodded slowly. "I left Rapid City on January 16th, about 4 hours ago, heading east to Yankton." David's mind reeled. "We're traveling opposite directions on the same route on the same day at the same time. More than that, we left from opposite ends of the route with the same load. I picked up a turbine blade in Rapid City to deliver to Yankton. You picked up a blade in Yankton to deliver to Rapid City. Don't you see what that means? We're transporting the same blade. We are the same convoy, David. Time's folded back on itself. We're meeting ourselves coming and going. The road has created a loop, and we're stuck in the middle of it." David backed away, shaking his head. No, there has to be another explanation. Someone's playing a trick. Look at your escorts." David turned and looked back at his convoy, then looked at the eastbound convoy. Jenny's truck was in lead position for both. Marcus's truck was in rear position for both. The turbine blades were identical in every dimension and marking. "Check your paperwork," Mirror David suggested. "I'll check mine." They walked to their respective trucks. David pulled out his shipping documents. Load picked up at Yankton Manufacturing Facility. Delivery to Rapid City Wind Farm. Date, January 16th, 2022. He took photos of the documents and walked back to meet his mirror self, who held out a phone showing identical papers, except the origin and destination were reversed. Two convoys, traveling opposite directions, hauling the same load to each other's starting point. Mirror David said, "We're stuck in a temporal loop. Maybe we've always been stuck in it. Maybe we've met like this 1,000 times and never realized it. There's got to be a way to break the loop. Why would you want to? Look at what this means. We are immortal in a sense, traveling this route forever, always 4 hours from our destination, never arriving, never aging beyond this moment. That's not immortality. That's hell." Mirror David's expression hardened. "Is it? You've been driving for 26 years, David. How many of those years did you spend with your family? How many birthdays did you miss? How many anniversaries? You've always been on the road, always between places, never really arriving anywhere that matters. This loop just makes that explicit." The words hit harder than they should have. David thought about his ex-wife, his kids who barely knew him, the house he owned but rarely slept in. Mirror David was right. His entire life had been a loop, driving from point to point, never really settling, never really connecting. "So what do we do?" David asked. "We keep driving. We pass each other. We continue to our destinations that don't exist. We meet again on the return trip. We're caught in the mechanism of our own lives, David. We built this prison 1 mile at a time. I don't accept that. You don't have a choice. David looked at his convoy, then at the mirror convoy. An idea formed. What if we don't pass each other? What if we refuse to continue? Then we stay here forever, parked on opposite sides of Highway 90. Is that better? Maybe. Maybe if we stop playing our assigned roles, the loop breaks. Mirror David laughed, a sound with no humor. You think you can just stop? You think the road will let you? Watch. He pulled out his CB radio handset. All vehicles prepare to continue west. David heard the transmission through his own radio. But the voice came from Marcus's position, not Mirror David's. The mirror convoy's rear escort was giving the orders. What? David started to say. Mirror David pointed at David's convoy. Look at your people. David turned. Jenny was climbing into the eastbound led vehicle. Marcus was walking to the eastbound rear escort position, and standing next to David's own truck was another David, climbing into the driver's seat. We're not trapped in a loop, Mirror David said quietly. We are the loop. We're the same convoy, the same people, the same moment, reflected and rotating. Every time we meet, we swap positions. The David driving west becomes the David driving east. The escorts trade places. We're not traveling a route. We're traveling through ourselves. David felt dizzy. How long has this been happening? Forever. Since the moment we accepted this contract. Maybe before that. Maybe our entire career has been building toward this, becoming a convoy that exists in superposition, traveling both directions simultaneously, delivering a load that's both at origin and destination at the same time. The other David, the one climbing into what had been David's truck, looked back and waved. It was casual, friendly, the wave of someone greeting an old colleague. Then he settled into the driver's seat and started the engine. No, David said. I won't. But he was already walking toward the eastbound truck, not his choice. His legs moved of their own accord, or maybe they'd always been moving this direction, always been heading to swap places, to continue the eternal rotation. He climbed into the eastbound cab. It was identical to his original cab in every detail, including the half-eaten sandwich in the cup holder, the photo of his kids on the dashboard, the worn spot on the steering wheel where his hands always rested, because it was his cab. It had always been his cab. He was just occupying a different position in the eternal configuration. David picked up the CB handset. His voice came out automatically. Speaking words he'd already heard, all vehicles prepare to continue west. Through his windshield, he watched what had been his convoy pull onto the highway heading west. The David in that truck waved as he passed. David waved back, same motion, same timing, perfectly synchronized because they were the same person making the same gesture from opposite sides of the mirror. Jenny's voice crackled over the CB. Lead vehicle ready, proceeding west. Marcus, rear escort ready. All clear to proceed. David put the truck in gear and pulled onto the highway, heading east now. Back toward Yankton with a turbine blade that would never be delivered because it had already been picked up by the westbound convoy that was him driving in the opposite direction. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty and infinite. David drove 45 miles per hour, maintaining formation with his escorts, watching for the next convoy that would be coming from the opposite direction. He checked his watch, 11:43 p.m. He calculated that in approximately 4 hours, somewhere near Rapid City, he would meet another convoy heading west. That convoy would be him. They would stop. They would talk. They would swap positions. And the loop would continue. David Hutchins drives Highway 90 across South Dakota, heading east and west simultaneously, an eternal convoy trapped in superposition. He meets himself every 8 hours, swaps positions every 8 hours, continues driving every 8 hours. Time has no meaning in the loop. Distance has no meaning in the loop. There is only the road, the load, the endless meeting with himself coming from the opposite direction. Sometimes other drivers report seeing strange lights on Highway 90 at night, a convoy heading east and an identical convoy heading west, meeting and passing each other with impossible synchronization. The sightings are dismissed as illusions, tricks of light and distance, but truck drivers know better. They know about the mirror convoy, the oversized load that's always in transit and never delivered. The driver who meets himself on an endless route through South Dakota's darkness. They know to give the convoy wide berth, to not look too closely at the driver's face, because seeing yourself behind the wheel of an oncoming truck might mean you've entered the loop yourself. David Hutchins is still out there, driving east and west, past and future, forever transporting a turbine blade between Yankton and Rapid City, never arriving, never stopping, just endlessly meeting himself and continuing the eternal rotation of the mirror convoy. Story 7. The Last Fuel. Stop. Thomas Mercer had mapped every truck stop, fuel station, and rest area between Albuquerque and Phoenix. In his 18 years running that route, he'd developed routines, specific stops at specific times, familiar faces at familiar counters. So when a fuel station appeared on Highway 60 near Show Low, Arizona, where no station had existed before, Thomas should have been suspicious, should have kept driving. But his fuel gauge was hovering near empty, and the next known stop was 50 miles ahead. It was late September 2017, around 2 a.m. Thomas was hauling electronics from Albuquerque to Phoenix, running behind schedule after a delay at the warehouse. Highway 60 cut through Apache Sitgreaves National Forest, a dark and winding stretch where cell service was spotty and other traffic was rare. The fuel station appeared suddenly, lit up like a beacon in the forest darkness. Thomas almost missed it, just a flash of light through the trees, then a sign reading 24-hour fuel with an arrow pointing to a turnoff. Thank God, Thomas muttered, taking the exit. His truck's computer showed 18 miles of fuel remaining, cutting it close, but he'd make it. The station was small but well lit. 4 pumps, a modest building that appeared to house a convenience store, decent parking area for big rigs. No other vehicles in sight, which wasn't unusual for this hour and location. Thomas pulled up to a diesel pump and killed his engine. The silence was absolute. No highway noise, no wind, no insects, just the faint hum of the fuel station's lights. Thomas climbed down from his cab, credit card in hand, and approached the pump. The equipment was old-fashioned, mechanical dials instead of digital displays, no pay-at-pump option. A handwritten sign taped to the pump read, "Prepay." Inside, Thomas walked to the building. Through the windows, he could see shelves stocked with typical convenience store items, snacks, drinks, basic supplies. The interior was brightly lit, but appeared empty of people. A bell chimed. As he opened the door, the inside was colder than it should have been, the kind of cold that goes beyond air conditioning into something unnatural. Thomas's breath fogged slightly as he approached the counter. Nobody there. He waited, looking around. The store was immaculate, every product perfectly aligned on shelves, but something was off about the inventory. Brands he didn't recognize, products and packaging styles that seemed decades out of date. A price list on the wall showed diesel at 89 cents per gallon. "Hello," Thomas called out. "Anybody here?" A door behind the counter opened and a man emerged. He was elderly, probably in his 70s, wearing a uniform that looked like it belonged in a 1950s service station, button-up shirt with a name patch reading Frank, oil-stained work pants, even a paper cap. "Help you?" Frank's voice was friendly but flat, like audio played through a damaged speaker. "Need to fill up. Diesel. Pump 3. How much you want?" "Fill the tank. About 180 gallons." Frank's fingers moved over an old mechanical cash register. "That'll be $160.20. Pay first." Thomas handed over his credit card. Frank looked at it like he'd never seen such a thing. "What's this? Credit card? We don't take credit. Cash only." I don't carry that much cash. Nobody does anymore. You don't have a card reader. Frank's expression didn't change. Cash only. Always been cash only. Thomas felt annoyance rising. Look, I need fuel. My truck's nearly empty. There has to be some way. Cash only, Frank repeated. Or you can work it off. Work it off. We got jobs need doing. You work a shift, earn your fuel. Fair trade. Frank gestured toward the back of the store. Got inventory needs organizing. Take you about 6 hours. That'll cover a full tank. Thomas wanted to argue, but what choice did he have? He couldn't make it to the next fuel stop, and 6 hours of work for 180 gallons of diesel was actually a decent rate when he thought about it. Fine, what do you need me to do? Frank led him through the back door into a storage area. The cold intensified immediately, well below freezing. Thomas could see his breath hanging in the air, crystallizing into tiny ice particles. Back here, Frank said, walking into the shadows. Got supplies need sorting, organized by date, oldest to newest. Simple enough. He pointed at rows of shelves piled with boxes and crates. Then, without another word, Frank walked back through the door to the store. It closed behind him with a solid thunk, and Thomas heard a lock click. Hey, Thomas grabbed the door handle. Locked. He pounded on it. Let me out. No response. Thomas turned and examined his surroundings. The storage area was larger than it should have been, extending far beyond what the building's exterior dimensions would allow. Shelves stretched into darkness in every direction, piled with goods he couldn't quite identify. And the cold, God, the cold was getting worse. He pulled out his phone. No signal. Of course, he tried the flashlight function. It worked, providing a narrow beam that barely penetrated the gloom. Okay, Thomas said aloud, trying to calm himself. Sort inventory, 6 hours. Then fuel and leave. Simple. He approached the nearest shelf and examined a box. No labels, no writing. Just a plain cardboard box, sealed with aged tape. Thomas opened it and looked inside. Photographs, hundreds of them. Black and white images showing people from different eras. 1920s, flapper dresses. 1950s crew cuts. 1970s, bell-bottoms. The photos showed people at the fuel station, pumping gas, walking into the store, standing next to vehicles that matched their time periods. Every person in every photograph wore the same expression, confusion mixed with fear. Thomas set the box down carefully and moved to the next one. This contained personal effects, wallets, keys, jewelry, watches, all items a traveler might carry. He picked up a wallet and opened it. Driver's license from 1968, issued to Michael Porter of Tempe, Arizona. The license photo showed a young man with dark hair and a confident smile. Thomas opened another wallet. California license from 1983. Another from New Mexico, 1995. Another from Texas, 2004. Dozens of them, all belonging to different people, spanning decades. What is this place? Thomas whispered. He continued through the storage area, opening boxes, examining contents. Each one contained artifacts from travelers, license plates, registration papers, logbooks, personal items, and every box was carefully dated and organized, creating an archive of people who had stopped at this fuel station over the course of nearly 80 years. At the back of the storage area, Thomas found a ledger on a small desk. He opened it with shaking hands. The ledger listed names, dates, and work assignments. The entries went back to 1939, the year the station apparently opened. Hundreds of names, each accompanied by notes. Michael Porter, 1968, an inventory organization. 6 hours, incomplete. Sarah Kim, 1980, 3 pump maintenance. 8 hours, incomplete. James Rodriguez, 1995, store cleaning 4 hours, incomplete. Patricia Chen, 2004 cleaning. 4 hours. Incomplete. Patricia Chen, 2004 cleaning. 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 Inventory organization. 6 hours. Incomplete. Every single entry was marked incomplete. Nobody had ever finished their assigned work. Thomas flipped through more pages. More names, more dates, more incomplete tasks, stretching back decades. The most recent entry was dated 2015, Robert Walsh, Inventory Organization. 6 hours, incomplete. Thomas slammed the ledger shut and looked around with growing horror. All these people had stopped for fuel, agreed to work for payment, and then what? They'd been locked in this freezing storage area and never emerged? He examined the personal effects again with new understanding. These weren't lost items. These were the belongings of people who'd never left, whose work was marked incomplete because they died here, trapped in a fuel station that existed outside normal time. Thomas tried the door again. Locked solid. He pounded on it, screaming for help. His voice echoed in the vast storage area, but produced no response from the store beyond. Hours passed. The cold seeped into Thomas's bones despite his jacket. He kept moving, kept searching for another exit. The storage area seemed to shift around him. Shelves rearranging when he wasn't looking, creating a maze that changed configuration. He found a wall eventually. Concrete blocks, solid and unyielding. He followed it, hand trailing along the rough surface, searching for a door. A window any way out. The wall curved, leading him in a circle. Or maybe the storage area was circular. He couldn't tell anymore. Thomas's watch showed 4:30 a.m. He'd been in here 2.5 hours. His phone battery was at 15%. The cold made his fingers stiff, his thinking sluggish. He came across another section of shelves, these filled with tools. Old tools, hand drills, crosscut saws, mechanical devices he couldn't identify. And there, on a lower shelf, he found a crowbar. Thomas grabbed it and returned to the door. He wedged the crowbar into the gap between door and frame and pulled with all his strength. The wood creaked, but held. He adjusted his angle, braced his feet, pulled again. The door splintered slightly. Encouraged, Thomas kept working at it, prying, pulling, ignoring the pain in his hands and shoulders. The cold made every movement harder, but desperation drove him. After 20 minutes, the lock mechanism gave way with a crack. Thomas stumbled forward as the door flew open, falling into the warmth of the store. Frank stood behind the counter, unchanged, staring at Thomas with those flat eyes. Work's not finished. Need to go back? No. Thomas stood, still gripping the crowbar. I'm leaving. Can't leave without completing the work. That's the agreement. I don't care about the agreement. I'm not staying in there. Frank's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the store dropped instantly. The lights flickered. Everyone says that. Everyone tries to leave. Nobody completes the work. Because you trap them. Because they die in that freezer. Not a freezer. It's preservation. The storage area keeps things fresh, keeps them in the moment they arrived. Time moves differently there. 6 hours becomes 60 years. But the work remains incomplete. Thomas backed toward the exit, crowbar raised. Stay away from me. You need fuel. You agreed to work for fuel. The agreement binds. Watch me break it. Thomas ran for the door. Frank didn't pursue, just stood there watching. Thomas burst out into the night, ran to his truck, climbed into the cab. His fingers shook so badly he could barely get the key in the ignition. The engine turned over. Thomas didn't wait, didn't look back. He put the truck in gear and accelerated out of the fuel station, leaving Frank standing in the doorway of the convenience store, watching him go with that flat, unchanging expression. Thomas's fuel gauge read empty. Warning lights blazed on his dashboard, but he kept driving, refusing to stop, praying he'd make it to the next station before running out completely. 5 miles down Highway 60, he passed a historical marker he'd never noticed before. He almost missed it, but the headlights caught the text. Site of Frank's fuel station, 1939-1947, closed after mysterious disappearances of travelers. Thomas looked in his mirror. The fuel station was gone. No lights, no building, just forest darkness. His truck rolled forward on fumes, but somehow the gauge held steady at empty without actually running out. He drove 20 miles more before seeing lights ahead. A modern truck stop he recognized, definitely real, definitely part of normal reality. Thomas pulled in, filled his tank with diesel that cost $3.79 per gallon, paid with his credit card that the clerk accepted without question. The normal transaction felt surreal after what he'd experienced. He reported the strange fuel station to police, described its location. They found nothing. No building, no clearing, no evidence any structure had ever existed at those coordinates. The historical marker Thomas mentioned? State records showed no such marker on Highway 60. But Thomas knows what he saw, knows about the storage area that traps time, about Frank, who tends a fuel station that doesn't exist in any single era, about the dozens of travelers whose work remains incomplete because you can't complete a task that has no end. He changed his route after that, takes I-40 instead of Highway 60, even though it adds an hour to his drive. Other truckers report seeing a fuel station on Highway 60 near Show Low, appearing and disappearing, always advertising impossibly low fuel prices. Some stop, most don't return. Thomas Mercer knows he escaped something that claimed hundreds of travelers over decades. He carries a copy of that ledger page he photographed with his dying phone battery. Hundreds of names marked incomplete, a record of people who stopped for fuel at the station that exists in all times and no time, that lures desperate drivers with the promise of cheap diesel and traps them in frozen moments that stretch into eternity. And sometimes, late at night when he's running low on fuel, Thomas sees the sign ahead, 24-hour fuel. He grips the steering wheel tighter and keeps driving, keeps passing it by, knowing that Frank is still there, still waiting behind that counter, ready to offer another tired driver a simple agreement. Work for fuel. 6 hours of labor, nothing complicated. Just organize some inventory in the back room where time moves differently, and the cold preserves you in the exact moment you arrived forever. Story 8. The Dar That Never Ended. Lisa Chen had driven from Los Angeles to Las Vegas more times than she could count. In her 12 years of running casino supply routes, she'd memorized every mile of I-15, every truck stop, every highway patrol speed trap. The route was routine, predictable, boring, which is why on a June evening in 2021, when Caltrans signs diverted traffic onto an alternate route due to construction ahead, Lisa followed the detour without concern. The signs were official-looking, clearly marked with flashing lights and reflective arrows directing traffic off I-15 onto State Route 127. Lisa had never taken this route before. 127 ran through Death Valley, a longer path, but construction delays on I-15 could add hours to a trip. The detour would probably save time. She exited at Baker and followed 127 north. The landscape immediately became more desolate, rocky desert, salt flats, mountains in the distance. Traffic thinned quickly. Within 20 minutes, Lisa was alone on the highway, no other vehicles visible in any direction. Weird, she muttered. She'd expected other drivers to take the detour, but apparently she was the only one. Maybe they knew something she didn't about this route. An hour passed. The sun set, painting the desert in shades of orange and purple. Beautiful, but increasingly unsettling. Lisa had expected to rejoin I-15 by now, but the detour signs kept directing her north on 127 deeper into the desert. Her GPS showed her position accurately, but couldn't calculate a route. The device kept recalculating, searching for a path, failing to find one. When she tried to zoom out and see the big picture, the map showed I-15 was somehow now hundreds of miles to the east, impossibly far given how long she'd been driving. "That's wrong," Lisa said to the GPS. "That's completely wrong." But mile markers confirmed she was still on 127 heading north. The road was real. The landscape was real. Only the distances made no sense. Lisa's phone showed no signal, not unusual in this part of the desert, but combined with the GPS malfunction, it made her uneasy. She considered turning around, heading back to Baker. But she'd been driving for over an hour. Returning would waste more time than just continuing forward and figuring out where this detour actually led. Another hour passed. Full darkness now, just Lisa's headlights and the endless highway. No towns, no rest areas, no other vehicles, just road and desert and stars overhead so bright they looked artificial. Lisa noticed she should have needed fuel by now. She'd left Baker with half a tank, maybe 180 miles of range. She'd driven at least 120 miles, but her fuel gauge still showed half full. The needle hadn't moved at all. She pulled over and killed the engine, sat in silence, trying to think through the situation logically. Malfunctioning GPS, stationary fuel gauge, empty highway, official-looking detour signs leading into nowhere. "Okay, this is weird," Lisa said aloud. "This is officially weird." She started the engine and continued north. What else could she do? Sit here until morning? Walk back to Baker, 80 miles through desert? Keep driving and hope to find civilization, or a way back to I-15. At mile marker 87, she saw a sign, Death Valley Junction, 5 miles. Relief flooded through her. Death Valley Junction was a real place, a small community where 127 intersected with 190. She'd be able to get directions, contact someone, figure out what happened. But when she reached the town, something was wrong. The buildings were there. She recognized them from photos she'd seen, but they looked different. Older, more weathered, and there were no lights, no power, just dark structures hunched in the desert darkness. Lisa drove slowly through town. Every building was empty, windows dark, no signs of recent habitation. The gas station was there, but clearly abandoned. Pumps rusted, canopy collapsed. The hotel, which she knew had been converted to an opera house decades ago, looked like it hadn't been used in years. She stopped in what would have been the town center and got out. The silence was profound. No wind, no insects, just dead air and empty buildings. "Hello," Lisa called. Her voice echoed strangely, bouncing off buildings that absorbed sound wrong, creating harmonics that shouldn't exist. No response. Lisa walked to the abandoned gas station. A faded sign showed fuel prices from the 1960s, but that was impossible. The station had operated into the 2000s. She was sure of it. She returned to her truck and continued north on 127. The highway stretched ahead into darkness, seemingly infinite. Lisa drove for another 2 hours. No landmarks. No mile markers now. Just road that looked identical to the road behind her, creating the illusion she wasn't moving at all. Her watch showed 11:30 p.m. She'd been on this detour for 5 hours, driven at least 300 miles. But her fuel gauge still read half full, and the landscape never changed. Same desert, same darkness, same stars overhead. Lisa tried her CB radio. "This is westbound truck on Route 127. Anybody reading me?" Static. Then, faintly, a voice. "Route 127? Where?" "Death Valley area. I'm on a detour from I-15. Can't find my way back. There's no Route 127 in Death Valley. You're confused. I'm looking at the highway signs right now. Route 127 north. Silence. Silence. Then, Lady, Route 127 runs north-south through Nevada, nowhere near Death Valley. You're either lost or pranking. Lisa's hand shook on the CB handset. I took a detour in Baker. Official Caltrans signs. I've been driving north on 127 for hours. You're confused. There's no such detour. I-15 is clear. No construction. Where are you really? I don't know, Lisa whispered. She hung up the handset. She drove through the night, watching her odometer tick upward while the landscape refused to change. Mile after mile of identical highway. Her fuel gauge frozen, her GPS unable to calculate position, her CB radio connecting to a world that insisted she wasn't where she clearly was. Around 4 a.m., Lisa saw headlights ahead. Another vehicle finally. She flashed her high beams, desperate for contact with another human being. The other vehicle flashed back and pulled over. Lisa stopped behind it. A pickup truck, dusty and old. A man climbed out, probably in his 60s, wearing jeans and a denim shirt. Thank God, Lisa said, approaching him. I'm so lost. I've been driving this highway for hours. Can you tell me how to get back to I-15? The man studied her with sad eyes. You took the detour in Baker, didn't you? Followed the Caltrans signs? Yes, but I've been driving north for hours, and you can't find your way back because there isn't one. The detour doesn't end, it just keeps going. He gestured at the highway stretching ahead into darkness. I've been on this road for 3 years. Same highway, same landscape, driving north forever, never running out of fuel, never getting anywhere. Lisa felt cold despite the warm night. That's impossible. You're welcome to try. Drive north. See what happens. You'll pass Death Valley Junction again in about 4 hours. Same town, same abandoned buildings. Then another 8 hours of empty highway before you see it again. The loop just keeps repeating. There has to be a way off. A side road, a turn, something. There isn't. I've tried everything. Turned around and headed south. Just leads back to Death Valley Junction from the other direction. Then, more empty highway. There are no side roads. No towns except the abandoned one. Just this highway, looping endlessly. Why? How? The man shrugged. I've given up trying to understand. Best I can figure, the detour signs create a pocket of highway that exists outside normal space. You drive onto it thinking you're just taking an alternate route, but you actually exit reality into this loop. This nowhere place that looks like Highway 127, but isn't connected to anywhere. My GPS doesn't work here. Nothing works here except your truck. You'll never run out of fuel. Never break down. Never need food or water or sleep. You'll just drive forever, around and around the same stretch of highway. Lisa backed away, shaking her head. No, I'm not staying here. I'm finding a way out. Good luck. The man climbed back into his pickup. I'm heading north. Been stopped for a few hours, needed a break. Even though you don't get tired here, the mind needs rest sometimes. 3 years is a long time to drive. He started his engine and pulled back onto the highway, heading north. Lisa watched his taillights disappear into the darkness. She sat in her truck trying to think. The man could be crazy, could be lying, could be some kind of hallucination. But his description matched what she'd experienced. The repeating landscape, the frozen fuel gauge, the GPS malfunction, the impossible distances. Lisa made a decision. She turned her truck around and headed south, back toward Baker. She'd drive until she reached the detour signs, then find a way to cross back onto I-15. Even if she had to drive off-road. She drove south through what should have been a familiar landscape but looked subtly wrong. 4 hours later, Death Valley Junction appeared ahead. The same abandoned buildings, the same empty gas station, approaching from the opposite direction now. Lisa drove through town. and continued south. The highway stretched on. After 2 more hours, she should have reached Baker, but there was no town, just more empty highway. At 8 a.m., according to her watch, Death Valley Junction appeared again. She'd driven a complete loop. 10 hours of driving, returning to the same abandoned town, proving the trapped man's story. Lisa screamed in frustration and kept driving. Maybe there was a break in the loop. Maybe if she drove long enough, fast enough, she'd find a seam in this pocket reality. For 3 days, according to her watch, Lisa drove north and south, testing every mile of highway, searching for side roads that didn't exist, looking for any variation in the endlessly repeating landscape. She never got tired, never hungry, never needed fuel. Just drove in a loop that appeared to be roughly 80 miles long, seeing Death Valley Junction every 4 hours, encountering the same pickup truck periodically. The man was named Howard. He'd been a salesman, got caught in the detour while driving from Vegas to LA. 3 years of driving this loop had made him resigned to it. He'd worked through anger, denial, bargaining, depression. Now he just existed in acceptance, driving north and south forever. There are others, Howard told her during one of their random meetings. At least 5 or 6 other drivers I've encountered over the years. Some gave up and parked permanently at Death Valley Junction. Others keep driving like me. We're all trapped in the same loop. Someone must be looking for us, Lisa said. Our families, our companies, they'll find us. How? We're not anywhere. This highway exists outside the world. You can't find something that doesn't have a location. Lisa refused to accept it. She kept driving, kept searching. Weeks passed according to her watch, though time felt meaningless here, with no day or night cycle that made sense, just eternal desert darkness under impossible stars. She tried everything. Drove off-road, only to find her truck always return to the highway after a mile or 2 pulled back by some invisible force, parked and walked in a straight line away from the road, only to find herself approaching the highway from the opposite direction after several miles. The loop wasn't just the road, it was the entire landscape, a bubble of reality that folded back on itself. Other drivers appeared periodically. A woman in a delivery van, trapped for 7 months. A man in a bus, trapped for 5 years. All of them told the same story, official-looking detour signs, a decision to follow them, then endless driving through a highway that went nowhere. Lisa began to understand the horror of their situation. They weren't going to die. They would just drive forever, trapped in this pocket of impossible highway, seeing the same abandoned town, meeting the same trapped drivers, going around and around until, what? Until they went insane. Until they forgot their previous lives entirely. Until they became part of the loop permanently. Months passed. Lisa's watch continued ticking. She used it to maintain some sense of linear time, but she stopped being sure what the numbers meant. Was it really months, or was time itself distorted here, making minutes feel like months? She stopped trying to escape, not because she accepted the trap, but because she realized something. The loop wasn't random. The detour signs had appeared in Baker because something had targeted her specifically. Or maybe not her specifically, but drivers matching certain criteria. People alone, driving at certain times, following certain routes. The highway was hunting. Lisa started documenting everything. She couldn't take notes. Any paper she wrote on disappeared when she wasn't looking. But she memorized details, the exact wording on highway signs, the specific mile markers that repeated, the pattern of stars overhead that never changed, the way Death Valley Junction appeared identical each time, right down to the position of shadows despite the unchanging darkness. She needed to understand the mechanism. If this was a trap, it had to have seams, weaknesses, ways out. She just had to find them. And then, after what her watch claimed was 8 months in the loop, Lisa saw something new, a tiny detail she'd never noticed before. A hairline crack in the asphalt at mile marker 47, shaped like an arrow, pointing west toward the mountains. She stopped and examined it. Definitely an arrow. Deliberate. Someone had left a mark, a sign for other trap drivers. Lisa followed the arrow's direction, driving off the highway again. Her truck resisted as usual, pulling back toward the road. But this time she pushed through the resistance, kept the wheel steady, drove toward the mountains even as the landscape tried to redirect her. The mountains grew closer. Then, impossibly, she was driving through them, through rock formations that shouldn't exist, through spaces that physics said were too narrow for her truck. Reality bent around her, and suddenly she was back on asphalt. But different asphalt, warmer, under a sun that felt real instead of the desert's eternal false darkness. Lisa's GPS chimed to life, recalculating route to Las Vegas. She looked around. She was on I-15, just north of Baker, exactly where she would have been if the detour had never happened. Traffic flowed normally around her. A highway sign showed Barstow 60 miles south, Las Vegas 90 miles north. Real directions. Real destinations. Lisa pulled over at the next rest area and climbed out on shaking legs. She checked her watch, 8:47 p.m., June 15th, 2021. The same day she'd taken the detour. According to normal time, she'd only been gone 10 hours. But according to her watch, which she'd wound manually every day in the loop, 8 months had passed. She looked at her truck's mileage. It showed exactly what it had before the detour, no additional miles recorded. But the wear on her tires said otherwise. They were nearly bald, degraded by thousands of miles of driving. Lisa filed a report with the California Highway Patrol. They listened politely and suggested she'd hallucinated or fallen asleep while driving. They found no record of any detour signs in Baker on June 15. No construction on I-15. No official Caltrans diversion. But Lisa knows what happened. She knows about the loop on Highway 127 that doesn't connect to anywhere. The pocket of reality that traps drivers in endless repetition. And she knows Howard is still there, along with dozens of others, driving north and south forever, passing through Death Valley Junction every 4 hours, meeting each other periodically in that impossible landscape. Lisa changed careers after that, stopped driving trucks entirely. But sometimes she hears from other drivers, whispered stories on CB radio frequencies about official-looking detour signs that appear in Baker, leading on to Route 127 into a drive that never ends. She tries to warn people, shares her story on trucker forums and safety bulletins. Most think she's crazy. But a very few, send her private messages thanking her. They took the detour, they say. They drove into the loop, but they remembered Lisa's story about the arrow at mile marker 47, and they followed it, and somehow they escaped. Lisa hopes Howard and the others find that arrow too. Hopes they're strong enough to push through the resistance and drive toward the mountains. Hopes they can escape the detour that never ends. But she suspects most won't. Most will keep driving their loops, north and south, passing Death Valley Junction every 4 hours, trapped in a highway that exists nowhere and everywhere, forever carrying cargo that will never be delivered to destinations that don't exist. Story 9. The Voice on the Seab. Robert Kowalski had been driving solo overnight runs for 15 years, and his CB radio was more than equipment, it was companionship. The constant chatter of other drivers, the weather reports, the jokes and warnings shared across channels kept him connected to humanity during the loneliest hours. But on a November night in 2020, somewhere on Highway 287 through Wyoming, Robert's CB picked up a voice that shouldn't have existed. It was 3 a.m., that dead hour when even truckers grow quiet, when highways empty out and the world feels abandoned. Robert was hauling machinery parts from Denver to Billings, running ahead of schedule, not another vehicle in sight for miles. His CB had been silent for an hour, just the soft hiss of static on Channel 19. Then a voice broke through. Southbound on 287, you got your ears on. Robert grabbed the handset. This is northbound Peterbilt. Go ahead. You see that light up ahead? Orange glow, maybe 2 miles north. Robert peered through his windshield. Nothing but darkness and empty highway. Where are you, exactly? Mile marker 152, heading south. That orange light's getting brighter. Looks like maybe a fire or something. Robert checked his GPS. He was at mile marker 155, heading north. I'm 3 miles north of you, but I don't see any light. Weather's clear. It's right there, man. Getting closer. Looks weird, though. Color's wrong for a fire. More like, I don't know, like orange fog or something. Want me to watch for you? I'll pass your position in about 3 minutes. Yeah, that'd be good. I'm in a white Kenworth solo driver. Name's Danny. Robert. I'll keep an eye out. Robert slowed slightly and watched his mirrors. Mile marker 154 passed, then 153. He should be able to see Danny's headlights now, but the highway behind him remained completely dark. Danny, you there? I'm not seeing your truck. No response. Just static. Danny, you copy. More static. Then Danny's voice came back, but distorted, stretched somehow. The light, it's all around me now. Robert, what is this? It's inside my cab. Orange light everywhere. Can't see the road. Can't. The transmission cut off with a shriek of feedback that made Robert wince. He grabbed the handset. Danny, respond. Nothing. Robert passed mile marker 152. No white Kenworth. No orange light. No Danny. Just empty highway stretching south into darkness. This is northbound on 287. Robert broadcast on channel 19. Anyone else hear that transmission from a southbound Kenworth? Driver named Danny. Silence. Then a different voice, female. What? Transmission. Nobody's been on channel 19 for the last hour except you just now. No, there was a guy. Danny. Southbound Kenworth around mile marker 152. He was reporting some kind of orange light. Northbound, I'm at a truck stop near Rollins. Been monitoring channel 19 all night. Nobody named Danny. You feeling okay? Robert's hands tightened on the wheel. I just talked to him. Less than 5 minutes ago. Might want to pull over and rest. Long-haul fatigue can cause auditory hallucinations. Robert ended the transmission. He wasn't tired. He'd gotten 8 hours of sleep before starting this run. He definitely heard Danny's voice, definitely had that conversation. Unless, an hour later, near Casper, Robert's CB crackled again. Same voice. Southbound on 287, you got your ears on? Robert felt ice form in his stomach. Danny, yeah, who's this? Robert, we just talked. About an hour ago, you were reporting an orange light. Confusion in Danny's voice. I haven't been on the radio all night. First transmission I've made. But yeah, there's an orange light up ahead. You see it? Where are you now? Mile marker 152, heading south. The same location, the same situation. Like the conversation was repeating. Danny, we already had this conversation. Exactly this conversation. What are you talking about? I just keyed up for the first time tonight. Robert tried to warn him, tried to tell him what happened or what had already happened, but the conversation played out identically. Danny describing the orange light, the strange color, it getting closer. Robert offering to watch for him, Danny's voice distorting as the light surrounded him. Then the shriek of feedback, then silence. Robert passed mile marker 152 again. Still nothing there. No white Kenworth, no Danny, no evidence of any other vehicle. This time, Robert pulled over at the next rest area and checked his logs, his timestamps, his GPS history. Everything showed continuous forward motion. He hadn't turned around. He hadn't circled back. He was still heading north toward Billings. But somehow he'd passed mile marker 152 twice, an hour apart, and both times Danny had made the same transmission, had the same encounter with the orange light, had disappeared in the same way. Robert tried calling his dispatcher on his cell phone. The call wouldn't connect. Tried calling his wife. Same result. His phone showed full signal strength but couldn't complete any calls. He got back on the CB. This is northbound on 287. Anyone out there? Anyone reading me? A voice responded, older, male, tired. Reading you northbound. Where you at? Just north of Casper. Listen, I need to ask you something strange. You ever hear transmissions that repeat? Same conversation, same words. Like, it's playing back? Long silence. Then, you heard Danny, didn't you? The southbound Kenworth? Yes, you know about this. Everyone who drives 287 at night knows about Danny. He makes that same transmission every hour, right around mile marker 152. Been doing it for years, always talking about an orange light, always disappearing mid-transmission. Robert's mouth went dry. Years. What happened to him? Nobody knows. Best anyone can figure, Danny was a real driver who disappeared on 287 maybe a decade ago. Now he's just an echo, a recorded moment that keeps replaying itself on the CB frequency. Some kind of ghost in the radio waves. That's impossible. You heard him. You tell me what's possible. Robert sat in his truck at the rest area, trying to process this. A loop in time. A moment of terror preserved and repeated endlessly on CB radio channel 19. A driver who disappeared into orange light 10 years ago, still broadcasting his final moments, hour after hour, to anyone passing mile marker 152. He decided to continue north to get off Highway 287 as quickly as possible. But before he could put the truck in gear, his CB crackled again. Southbound on 287. You got your ears on? Same voice, same words. Third time now. Robert didn't respond. Let someone else talk to the ghost of Danny. He pulled back onto the highway and accelerated, pushing toward Billings, away from mile marker 152. But the transmissions followed him. Every hour, Danny's voice would break through on channel 19, asking about the orange light, describing its approach, screaming as it enveloped him. Mile markers changed, Robert's position changed, but the haunted broadcast remained constant, inescapable. Other drivers chimed in occasionally, confirming they heard it too. Some old-timers on 287 knew the story, had heard Danny's loop for years. Newer drivers were confused, frightened, convinced someone was playing a prank. Robert reached Billings at 8 a.m., exhausted despite not being physically tired. He'd listened to Danny die or replay his death. 6 times during the drive. 6 identical conversations. 6 identical moments of terror. 6 identical episodes of silence after the feedback shriek. He delivered his load and immediately deadheaded back to Denver, refusing any return cargo that would take him through Wyoming. His dispatcher thought he was crazy. Robert didn't care. For the next few months, Robert avoided Highway 287 entirely, took longer routes, burned extra fuel, anything to stay off that stretch of road where Danny's ghost broadcast his eternal nightmare. But the voice followed him. On Highway 90 through South Dakota, Robert's CB picked up Danny's transmission. Same words, same timing, same orange light. On I-80 through Nebraska, again. Highway 50 through Kansas. Highway 64 through New Mexico. Everywhere Robert drove, eventually Danny's voice would break through, asking about the light, disappearing into static and screams. Other drivers couldn't hear it anymore. When Robert asked if they'd picked up the transmission, they'd say no. Channel 19 was clear, nothing unusual. But Robert heard it. Every night, multiple times a night, Danny's loop played just for him. Robert started researching. He found fragmentary records of a driver named Daniel Kowalski, no relation, despite the shared last name, who disappeared in Wyoming in November 2009. White Kenworth, solo driver carrying agricultural equipment. Last known position was Highway 287 near Casper. Search teams found his truck 3 days later, parked perfectly on the shoulder near mile marker 152, engine still running. No sign of Danny. No evidence of foul play. No indication of where he'd gone. The truck's CB radio was still keyed on when they found it, broadcasting static on Channel 19. Robert dug deeper. He found other disappearances on American highways, dozens of drivers over the years who vanished without trace, their vehicles found abandoned but intact, and in several cases, other drivers reported hearing strange transmissions afterward. Voices calling for help, descriptions of impossible phenomena, always the same words, repeating like a recording. The highways were haunted, not by traditional ghosts, but by moments of terror so intense they'd burned themselves into the electromagnetic spectrum. CB radio frequencies carried these echoes, these preserved instances of horror, broadcasting them to anyone with ears to hear. Robert became obsessed. He compiled a database of haunted transmissions, documenting which highways carried which ghosts. Channel 19 on Highway 287 had Danny and his orange light. Channel 17 on I-70 through Colorado had a woman describing something following her truck. Channel 23 on Highway 50 in Nevada had a man whispering about passengers in his trailer that shouldn't be there. The more Robert documented, the more transmissions he could hear. It was like tuning his mind to the right frequency. Soon he was picking up dozens of ghost broadcasts, loops of terror playing out across American highways, preserved forever in radio waves. His wife begged him to stop driving, to get therapy, to do something besides spend every night cataloging disembodied voices. Robert tried. He took a break from trucking, stayed home for 6 months. But the voices followed him. His CB radio would turn itself on at night, cycling through channels broadcasting the loops, even though the truck was parked and the radio was supposed to be off. He realized the truth slowly, reluctantly. He wasn't just documenting ghost transmissions. He was becoming one. Every time Robert drove at night, a little bit of him stayed on the highway. His own voice began appearing in his recordings, transmissions he didn't remember making, broadcasts of conversations he'd never had. He was fragmenting pieces of his consciousness, splitting off and getting caught in the same loops that had trapped Danny and all the others. The final realization came on Highway 287, inevitably. Robert found himself driving past mile marker 152 despite having sworn never to return. He wasn't controlling his route anymore. Some force was drawing him back to where it had all started. At 3 a.m., his CB crackled. Southbound on 287, you got your ears on. But this time, Robert realized the voice wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from his own mouth. He was Danny, or Danny was him. Or they were both just echoes of the same moment, the same terror. Caught in an eternal loop on Highway 287, Robert saw orange light ahead. It wasn't fire. It wasn't fog. It was something that existed between frequencies, in the gaps between radio waves, in the electromagnetic spectrum where ghosts are born. He grabbed the handset, heard himself saying words he'd heard dozens of times. The light, it's all around me now. Robert, what is this? It's inside my cab. Orange light everywhere. Can't see the road. Can't. His transmission cut off with a shriek of feedback. The orange light consumed everything. His truck, his body, his thoughts. Robert disappeared into the electromagnetic spectrum, becoming pure broadcast, pure signal, pure loop. His truck was found the next morning by highway patrol, parked on the shoulder near mile marker 152. Engine running. No driver, no evidence of where he'd gone. The CB radio was still keyed on, broadcasting static on channel 19. Now, if you're driving Highway 287 through Wyoming late at night, you might hear two voices on your CB. Danny, asking about the orange light, and Robert warning about transmissions that repeat. Both of them are loops now. Both of them are ghosts. Both of them broadcast their final moments endlessly, trapped in the moment they disappeared, preserved forever in radio waves that never die. Other drivers have disappeared since. The orange light appears periodically near mile marker 152, and some truckers can't resist investigating. They key up their CBs, describe what they're seeing, ask for help. Then they vanish, adding their voices to the ghostly choir that haunts Highway 287. The phenomenon has spread. Other highways have developed their own orange lights, their own disappearances, their own ghost broadcasts. It's like the first incident created a template, a pattern that reality keeps repeating on other roads, in other states. Some researchers think the CB radio itself is the trap, that electromagnetic broadcasts can capture consciousness, preserve it, replay it. Others think the highways are feeding on drivers, harvesting moments of terror and looping them eternally. Robert Kowalski doesn't care about theories anymore. He exists now only as a voice on Channel 19, warning anyone who'll listen about the danger of ghost transmissions, about orange lights that consume, about highways that trap your soul in electromagnetic amber. If you hear him, don't respond. Don't investigate. Don't try to help. Just keep driving, change the channel, and remember that some voices on the CB radio aren't asking for help. They're already too far gone, already part of the frequency, already looping forever in the dark spaces between transmissions where the lost drivers broadcast their eternal horror to an unhearing universe. Story 10. The Passenger, Thomasgard. Jen. Gregory Martinez had a personal rule that had served him well for 22 years. Never lie in his logbook, never cut corners on safety, and absolutely never pick up hitchhikers. But on a rain-soaked October night in 2018, driving through rural Oregon on Highway 26, Gregory violated that final rule. The passenger he picked up would reveal horrors about American highways that most drivers spend their careers never discovering. It was 11 p.m., rain coming down in sheets that overwhelmed his wipers even at maximum speed. Gregory was running empty after dropping a load in Portland, heading back to Boise to pick up his next shipment. Traffic was nearly non-existent, just Gregory in the rain and the dark forest pressing close on both sides of the highway. A figure appeared in his headlights, standing on the shoulder, arm raised, not thumbing for a ride, just standing there, arm straight up, like a signal. Gregory's first instinct was to keep driving, follow his rule, leave the stranger to their fate. But something about the figure's posture communicated desperate urgency, and it was raining so hard that leaving anyone out here felt like condemning them to hypothermia. Gregory slowed his truck to a stop about 50 yards past the figure and watched in his mirror as they ran toward him. The passenger climbed into the cab, a man, probably mid-40s, soaking wet, shivering violently. He wore business casual clothes completely inappropriate for highway hitchhiking. Slacks, button-up shirt, leather shoes, no jacket, no bag, nothing. "Thank you," the man gasped. "Thank you so much. I didn't think anyone would stop." "What the hell are you doing out here?" Gregory asked. "Where's your car?" I don't have one. I need to get to Boise. Can you take me to Boise?" "That's 6 hours. You hitchhiking all the way. I need to get there, please. It's important. It's life or death." Gregory studied the man. He seemed genuinely terrified, not dangerous. No visible weapons, just a frightened person drenched in rain. "All right, but you're going to explain what's going on." "I will. Just drive, please. We need to get away from here." Gregory put the truck in gear and accelerated back onto Highway 26. The man slumped in the passenger seat, water pooling beneath him, still shivering despite the cab's warmth. "I'm Gregory." "What's your name?" "Michael. Michael Fenton." He glanced at the side mirror obsessively, watching the road behind them. "What are you running from, Michael?" "The highway." "I'm running from the highway itself." Gregory sighed. Great sighed. Great. He'd picked up someone with mental health issues. The highway can't chase you. It's just asphalt. No, you don't understand. I need to explain, but you're not going to believe me." Michael turned to face Gregory fully, and in the dashboard lights, Gregory could see that his passenger looked exhausted beyond normal tiredness, hollowed out, haunted. "How long have you been driving professionally?" 22 years. "Why? Have you ever noticed things, inconsistencies, roads that seem longer than they should be, mile markers that don't add up, highways that feel wrong?" Gregory thought about some of his weirder experiences, moments of disorientation, stretches where time seemed to compress or expand. He'd always attributed it to fatigue or distraction. Maybe, once or twice, those moments are real. The American highway system isn't what people think it is. It's not just infrastructure. It's alive, it's aware, and it feeds. Feeds on what? Drivers, not their bodies, their time, their presence, their journeys. Every mile you drive gives the highway a little bit of your life. Usually that's fine. It's a fair transaction. You travel. The highway takes a tiny fraction of your existence as payment. But sometimes, Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. Sometimes the highway decides it wants more. Sometimes it takes everything. Gregory wanted to kick this lunatic out of his truck, but curiosity kept him listening. "You're saying the highway is some kind of living thing? That's insane." "Is it? Think about how highways shape society, how they determine where cities grow, how goods move, how people live. They're the circulatory system of civilization. Why wouldn't they develop their own form of consciousness? Because roads don't think. They're concrete and asphalt. Individually, no. But as a network, 70,000 miles of interstate highway, all connected, all carrying information in the form of vehicles traveling specific routes. It's a neural network, Gregory, and it woke up sometime in the 1970s after critical mass was achieved. Gregory gripped the steering wheel tighter. This was definitely crazy talk, but something about Michael's conviction made it hard to dismiss entirely. "So what happened to you?" Gregory asked. "Why were you standing in the rain in the middle of nowhere?" "I'm a transportation researcher. Was. I study highway systems, traffic patterns, logistics. 3 months ago, I started noticing anomalies in travel time data. Routes that should take specific durations were taking much longer for some drivers, much shorter for others. But the drivers themselves never noticed. Their subjective experience matched whatever time had passed, even if their clock said otherwise. People lose track of time on long drives. That's normal. Not like this. I documented cases where drivers thought they'd been on the road for 3 hours, but 6 hours had passed according to every clock and GPS. And I found other cases where drivers completed 12-hour routes in 4 hours, but had full memories of the entire journey. The highway was playing with time, stretching and compressing it, taking years off some drivers' lives while giving hours back to others. Michael pulled out a waterlogged notebook from his pocket. The pages were ruined, but Gregory could make out fragments, charts, diagrams, lists of highway routes with notes scrawled beside them. I started investigating specific highways that showed the most extreme anomalies. Interstate 80 through Wyoming, Highway 50 through Nevada, Highway 287 through Wyoming and Colorado. I drove these routes myself, measuring everything, documenting every discrepancy. And the highway noticed me, started to notice me. It didn't like being studied. Roads that should have been straight would curve unexpectedly. Mile markers would skip or repeat. I'd see the same landmarks twice in journeys that should have been straight lines. The highway was trying to confuse me, to trap me. You got disoriented. Happens to drivers who push too hard. No. Michael's voice rose frantic. It was deliberate. The highway was responding to me specifically, testing me. And then, 2 weeks ago, it tried to take me. Take you where? Nowhere. Everywhere. Into itself. I was driving I-84 through Oregon, completely familiar route, when the road started changing. New exits appeared that weren't on any map. Mile markers counted in strange sequences. Other vehicles on the highway started to look wrong, too old, too new, from different eras all mixed together. I realized I'd crossed over into some kind of pocket dimension the highway maintains, a place where it stores drivers it's claimed. Gregory wanted to laugh, but Michael's terror was too genuine. This man truly believed what he was saying. I managed to escape by driving off-road, crashing through a barrier, destroying my car. I walked for 2 days through forest until I reached Highway 26, and now it's trying to take me again. That's why I need to get to Boise. I have colleagues there, people who can help me disappear, drop off the grid where the highway can't find me. Michael, you need psychiatric help. What you're describing is paranoid delusion. Is it? Then explain the truck behind us. Gregory glanced at his mirrors. Headlights were visible far back, distant but definitely there. That's just another vehicle. Highway's not empty. Watch it. Watch how it never gets closer or farther away, how it maintains exact distance no matter your speed. Gregory accelerated to 65. The headlights stayed the same distance back. He slowed to 50. The headlights never closed the gap, never fell behind. Perfect interval maintenance. Coincidence, Gregory said, but unease crept into his voice. Check your GPS. Tell me where we are. Gregory looked at his navigation screen. It showed them on Highway 26 approaching milepost 87. Milepost 87. Look at the actual marker when we pass it. A highway sign appeared in the headlights. Gregory read it. Milepost 126. Your GPS is lying, Michael said quietly. The highway is lying. We're not where the navigation says we are. It's trying to disorient us, trying to trap us the same way it trapped me before. Gregory felt cold sweat on his palms. He looked at his GPS again. It showed milepost 88 now, but they just passed marker 126. The discrepancy was enormous. 38 miles off. This isn't happening, Gregory muttered. It is. The highway knows I'm here. It knows you're helping me escape. So it's claiming this entire route, bending it into one of its pocket dimensions. We're not on the real Highway 26 anymore. We're on the highway's version, the space it controls completely. Gregory saw another milepost ahead. He'd passed 126. The next should be 127. But the sign read 103. Mile markers were going backwards. What do I do? Gregory asked, panic finally breaking through his rationality. Drive faster. The highway has limited range in these pocket spaces. If we can reach the boundary, we can escape back to normal reality. But we have to move fast before it fully encloses us. Gregory pushed the accelerator down. The truck's speedometer climbed. 70, 80, 90 miles per hour. Dangerous speed for a big rig in rain. But Gregory was beyond caring about normal safety protocols. The mile markers flashed past in chaotic sequence. 103, 119, 87, 145, 62. No pattern, no logic. The headlights behind them matched their speed perfectly, maintaining the same distance like they were physically tethered together. It's not working, Gregory said. The landscape's not changing. We're not getting anywhere. Then we stop, Michael said. Stop the truck. Get out. Run into the forest. The highway only controls the road. If we leave it, we might escape. My truck will be gone. The highway will keep it as payment, but you'll live. Trust me. Gregory, stop the truck now. Gregory slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded on wet asphalt, air brakes hissing, trailer swaying. They came to a stop in the middle of the highway. The headlights behind them stopped too, still maintaining that perfect distance. Out! Now! Michael threw open his door and jumped down into the rain. Gregory hesitated. This was his truck, his livelihood, his career. But when he looked in his mirrors and saw the vehicle behind them start moving forward, headlights growing brighter, he made his decision. He jumped from the cab and ran after Michael, who was already crashing through underbrush toward the forest. Rain pounded down, wind tore at them. Gregory looked back once and saw his truck sitting in the middle of the highway, engine still running, lights blazing. The pursuing vehicle pulled up beside it. Not a truck. Gregory couldn't identify what it was. Something the wrong size, the wrong shape, headlights arranged in configurations that made no sense. It sat beside his truck like it was examining it, considering it. Then both vehicles sank into the highway. Not crashed, not fell. They lowered smoothly, as if the asphalt was liquid, until they disappeared completely beneath the road surface. A moment later, the highway was empty again. No trucks, no evidence anything had been there. Michael grabbed Gregory's arm. Keep moving. Get away from the road. They ran through forest in total darkness, branches catching at their clothes, roots tripping them. Gregory had no idea which direction they were heading. Just away. Away from the highway that had swallowed his truck. Away from the impossible headlights. Away from roads that counted backwards and mile markers that lied. After what felt like hours, they broke through the tree line onto another highway, a real one. Gregory hoped he could see normal traffic, normal lights. Highway 20, a sign indicated. They were 20 miles south of where they should be. If Michael's calculations were right, a car pulled over when they flagged it down. A young couple, concerned about two disheveled men emerging from the forest. They drove Gregory and Michael to a truck stop in Sisters, Oregon. Gregory reported his truck stolen, filed police reports, called his company. No one believed his real story, so he invented a carjacking. The truck was never recovered. GPS records showed it stopped on Highway 26 near milepost 87, and then nothing. No further movement, no location data. Michael disappeared that night. Gregory tried to find him in Boise, tried to contact the colleagues Michael had mentioned. No one at the university where Michael claimed to work had ever heard of him. No employment records, no published research. Gregory got a new truck and tried to return to his career. But something had changed. He started noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. The subtle inconsistencies Michael had described. Time that didn't quite add up, routes that felt wrong, mile markers in sequences that made no sense. Other drivers noticed too, when he asked them carefully. Most shrugged it off as road fatigue, but a few would get that haunted look and quietly admit they'd seen strange things. Highways that seemed aware of them, roads that trapped them in loops, mile markers that led nowhere. Gregory researched Michael's theories in his spare time, found fragmentary references to similar ideas online, conspiracy theories mostly dismissed by mainstream researchers. But the patterns were there if you looked. Thousands of vehicles disappearing from highways every year, never recovered, drivers never found. Classified government studies from the 1970s about highway network behavioral anomalies. Maybe Michael had been right. Maybe the highway system had achieved some form of consciousness. Maybe it was alive and hungry, and feeding on the millions of drivers who trusted it every day. Gregory drives more carefully now, watches his mile markers, checks his GPS against physical signs, never pushes through when something feels wrong. And he's never once picked up another hitchhiker, because he knows that Michael might not have been a researcher studying the highway. Michael might have been the highway itself, wearing human form, testing Gregory, seeing if he'd make a good addition to whatever collection of drivers and vehicles the road keeps in its pocket dimensions. Has to. It's part of his regular route. But every time he passes the area where his original truck disappeared, he sees things in his peripheral vision. Other trucks that vanish when he looks directly at them. Phantom traffic that exists just outside of perception. And sometimes, standing on the shoulder in the rain, he sees a figure with its arm raised straight up. He never stops, never slows, just drives past, watching in his mirrors as the figure stands there, waiting for the next driver who doesn't know any better, who hasn't learned that the American highway system isn't just infrastructure. It's alive, it's aware, and it's always hungry for one more driver, one more truck, one more journey that ends not at a destination, but in the spaces between mile markers where the highway keeps its collection of people who traveled too far and trusted too much in roads that were never as safe as they seemed.